are recording. Joe,
How's it going?
Joey, Cobbs, hello.
Hey.
This is kind of our first meeting, internet
Yeah.
or real life, so hi.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm
Nice.
I gotta start out by saying I'm really stoked to get the feedback like from you on the stuff that I've been trying to do lately and some of our
Yeah.
conversation, and it just
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and it's cool that it led us here.
Yeah, definitely. It's like every time you post one of those things, I have like all kind of things I want to like comment, but I'm also like, well, it's gonna just it's better to just have a conversation,
Yeah.
because it's like the comments are just too they don't really lead. I mean, they can lead to things, but at the same time, it's just, it's a slow way to do it. And it's one of those things that just, is gonna snowball when you start talking about it. So it's like, or it can easily snowball when you start talking about it. So
Yeah.
best to save it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny how you like we're sitting here talking like about this and it feels like comments are super unproductive. But then when you go on like Instagram or wherever, you see comment threads of like 50 to 100 whenever someone's and you read all of them, but you couldn't
Totally.
even
Well, and
remember it.
I think it's relative to, what you're posting. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if you're chopping up like movie highlights or something controversial, like some political thing, or you're trying to be controversial, then it's like you get a bunch of crazy comments on both
Hmm.
sides. But then it's like, oh, and like these events that we're doing, and like when we did the game of bike with Dennis and stuff, or just anything that I've ever done that has been like trying to just do some grassroots idea. Like it's always seems like the comments are like really positive or like insightful. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a lot of people like send me DMs that like will start a whole thing, like just send me links to videos like based off of something I mentioned in one of these conversations, and it like totally sends me down a road of like, oh, this is actually super helpful. And, you know, I definitely, one thing's for sure, I definitely like don't pretend to know everything. You know what I mean? As far as like how I definitely don't have things figured out, so it's like just kind of fly by the seat of our pants most of the time.
I will tell you, almost
Open ears.
everything I do is winging it.
Yeah, right. It's like how you do it and then you figure it out as you go. I was just thinking about it today, like, with this Borough Breaker thing, if we get to do another one, how we can just be a lot more prepared going into it.
Well, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
kind of thing that you're never gonna be able to plan for everything, and you may go into it feeling so confident and like, we got this nailed down, and then 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, didn't think of that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, overall, like there was so many variables that like it couldn't have gone any better, to be quite honest. Like, yeah, you can after the fact you can like point things out, or like I said, I kind of think of like, oh, how I'll do things differently if we get a chance to do it again. But in no way like um sorry, somebody texted me, lost my train of thought.
No,
My
you're
bad. That's
okay.
unprofessional. Wink. Yeah. But that was like, it's no way like, oh, we screwed up. It was just like, yeah, there's just way too many things to like know what to expect. And it's just you when you look back on things in hindsight, then it's like, oh yeah, like this would have worked out a lot better to do it like this. But then it's funny because some of the stuff I was like, it's just like, man, yeah, that would be a pain in the ass. I was just like thinking like, oh, how could we introduce the videos a little bit better, or like so it's not the same footage every time, or like
Mm,
try to keep things fresh. And I was like, yeah, like Billy could show up with like 10 different outfits and we could just kind of like swap out. It's like, but it's like shirts, whatever. And it's like, but it's the kind of thing you could do if you planned for it. It's just like, yeah, that's a pain in the ass though, and so then anyways, I'm rambling, but it's always a good learning experience, the first time you do something. But really, like so many things went right, and the things that I might be commenting on that I might have done differently, like tweaks, it's just like, oh, how could I make it better,
yeah.
basically. And it's like nothing's going to be perfect. And well, these types of events, that's kind of what you bank on, is things not going perfect. That's what you want, is the scramble, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And you want to kind of like document that. So we came away with like all the riders had footage. We're going to be able to make an episode from everybody. Like that was what we, set out to do. And also, I mean, what's funny is like about events like that is like, you have no idea if it's if it's even going to function in the first place. Like we're trying to think of a balance where like, we're not trying to bum anyone out. Like they get started and you're like, oh, this sucks. Like, this is not fun. I quit. This isn't worth it or whatever. Like that would be worst case scenario. And to us, it's a real, when I say us, Demarcus, Paul, and Billy, we're the main ones that planned it. It's like, it's a real possibility, like that people just kind of like don't get into it, and a couple of the guys said when we sent out the little road maps, that they were like pretty overwhelmed when they first saw everything. But then once they kind of got rolling and we're just checking things off, they were having a lot of fun with it. So it was good.
Yeah. So before we get too deep into the conversation here, the inspiration behind us having this conversation is stuff I've been doing recently and talking about certain things in BMX. And I never have enough forethought in these conversations to introduce them in ways of like, so I'm sitting here talking with you and we're going to inevitably talk about BMX and things that could be better and change and all the stuff you're working on. I want to actually introduce you before we do that because I never do that. So can you give me just a little bit of what your involvement in BMX has been and why you will actually be qualified for people to listen to what you have to say in terms of BMX?
Yeah, no, definitely. So my sort of experience in BMX, it's so funny. I could ramble about this all day, but I need to I'll try to keep it tight.
Yeah.
It's so funny, like looking back, I'll just start real quick on like where I grew up. There's a little town called Torrance and it's like in Southern California. It's like a suburb of LA. And most people will like roll their eyes or like Torrance kind of like a boring place, and it felt boring growing up. But in hindsight, it was like a lot of BMX history happened in Torrance. And there was like, Torrance was like a little hub for BMX. And so like, anyways, I kind of like got into riding through a shop down there and met a couple, this local rider named Mike Tokamoto. And he was like a legendary pool rider at the time. And he helped build a backyard ramp for me. Like that's a long story. I'm not going to go into it, but like I had a little bit of birthday money. And back then, this is like in 1996 and like there's no skate parks. And so for him, like he was like, I will put my own money in to build you a ramp if you can, like, you just let us session it. Like you can let me and my friends come ride. Cause they just are like, for him, he's building a spot in someone's backyard with permission, you know? And so little did I know though, that he knew, Mark Losi and like Brian Castillo and Keith Trainer and like, and I would like, he would bring over like Chris Day and like all these people, like I'm name dropping, but it was like literally as a kid, I didn't know anybody. And then, these guys were coming over and it was like, definitely an eye-opening experience. And like, I got really lucky just kind of growing up in this weird little hub of BMX. And I got to meet, a lot of people, but one of those people was Mark Losi, and he's photographer for BMX Plus. And then he was editor at Ride for a long time and photographer there. And I was always into photography. It was just, but not something I could afford. And so when I got to be old enough to like have a job and have a little bit of money, like I hit him up and was like, oh, what kind of camera should I buy? And like, it was just something I kind of wanted to get into. And then I would just like pick his brain and was shooting BMX stuff and trying to shoot stuff. And then at the time, Ride BMX had an office, like, again, just lucky, like 25 or 30 minutes from where I grew up. So like when I got a license, I could drive over there and show him my slides in person. Like I'm not submitting anything like in mail, just super lucky. Anyways, and then like, that's how I got into photography, is like, he just gave me a chance to do stuff, like little things with the magazine, or like occasionally he would see a photo that he liked that I shot. And that was enough to like, I went to college for photography. And then after that, after college, I started working with Brian Castillo, who I met through Toki, like when I was a kid. And, I started working for him, and then, doing video and photo stuff. And that's kind of how I met like Dennis and Christian. And, so that just spawned into shooting with the market guys, like during the DVD days and Market Zero. And around the same time, I moved to the Bay Area and met a bunch of people up there, a bunch of awesome BMX guys up there. And that led to a bunch of cool stuff. Like we did a bunch of, I would just do freelance stuff for Dig or Ride, or like some guys up there would have sponsors who try to shoot whatever we could. And at the time, like, it was the glory days in a sense, like we had magazines. And so if you had a friend who had a good sponsor that ran ads in magazines, you can go out and shoot with them, and if you came back with solid stuff, you could get ads with your friends, and like we'd sell those for like a few $100, like anywhere from like $250 to like $1,000, so like, and then shoot for the magazines at the same time. And so like that led to like I worked as a staff photographer at Dig for a little while, and that was really cool. And then started shooting freelance for Haro with the market guys, and like Dennis and Ronnie Napolitan was like the first ad. If I'm rambling, let me know.
No, this is great.
I can go.
Isn't it a nice summary while also covering a lot of ground?
Oh yeah. No, I fast forwarded. Like when I'm with the market guys, I've probably been riding. So like I started in '96 technically. And fun little side fact that I won't get sidetracked, but like I was lucky enough, like in that time, to go to Woodward camp. Mm-hmm. And that was like, again, the heyday. Like I had Dave Frymouth as a counselor. Jeez. And like Lucky, like John Engelbert, and who else was there? Like Kenan Harkin was like the main dude, the main BMX dude. And so like, yeah, it was like, again, I have like a Woodward t-shirt that has like so many six signatures on it. Nate Wessel was like living there. That was like when he built everything. Jeez. You know what I mean? So it was like Ron Kimler was just riding. He was on Schwinn, and it just like, and so it was like, and Van Homan was there as like a 16-year-old kid. Like I just remembered. And Joe Riley was also a camper. Like we were all campers.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah. And like I had just barely, it was my first year. Like I was way in over my head, but at the same time, those are like huge life-changing experiences, Right. And so fast forward again, like when I was shooting with the market guys, that's probably like close to 2010 or 11, I don't know. And so that's a number of years later. And I started shooting a lot with Dennis. And like I was living in the Bay Area, but I would come down to stay with Dennis at the Henderson house for like a week at a time, like once every 3 months or something. And that just kind of led to me moving to San Diego. Okay. And then I worked for Haro. Like it was weird. Like I would randomly get hit up by brands too. Like when I wasn't working for somebody, like there was a few times like I worked for Stolen, just like kind of planning a trip and like TMing a trip basically. But I wasn't on like, that I wasn't on like salary, or I wasn't an employee. I was shooting photos for them and shooting catalog stuff. And then they knew that I had like put together trips. And so they just gave me like a trip budget, and they just told me like the team the group they wanted to go and where they wanted to go. And so I got to do all that stuff. And that was just through meeting like some of the guys up in the Bay Area, like Kurt Russell and Jackson, and those guys like rode for Stolen at the time. So I was like bouncing around. And then, through stuff like that, I started working at Haro, and that ended last year. And now just like back to freelance stuff. And the whole time, like just working with magazines and working with brands, you're always just pitching ideas to try to like, do projects and do things that are just interesting for people to watch, And so that's kind of been my life in between working. Like the vast majority of my existence in BMX has been freelance, has just been all, just hustling projects, and maybe 6 or 7 years of that I've like actually been working for a company. So, I mean, that's, which is super fortunate, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
a lot more freelance and just kind of working with whoever, you know, which is, I think, kind of shaped how I look at things now, where like I have loyalty and like gratitude for people who have like helped me through my time. But at the same time, like I don't have any, like, I'm not so diehard with any one brand that I can't work with anyone. And it's always sort of like, let me like expose me to be like, damn, dude, we should be able to like work together a lot more efficiently, you know, and operate. You know, I heard Mueller, or I think I read in the Greystoke his piece about the BMX industry, and you know, just how there kind of isn't one really, just because we don't really work together. And it's just, and you know, to everyone's, I mean, and that's not even a critique, it's just the reality. Like it's just hard to keep the lights on, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of guys are really just they might just not have the, or a lot of brands, not guys, a lot of like groups, a lot of companies might just not have the luxury to have that forethought. You know what I mean? They're just trying to make their sales numbers so that they can keep the ship afloat. Oh shit, the ship afloat.
Well,
I bumped my cable super loose.
I think that is part of where a problem could lie too, is it through the conversations that have been had, and that these guys are BMX riders first, then they're working for these companies as team managers, whatever it might be, where they don't have the experience of doing that job for like a outside company, where you would be focused on just like, this is the job, this is how this industry works, and this is how this segment of this industry works. It's more of like, oh, you ride, you worked here, oh, we need this job, can you do this job? And then you're not quite as well versed in that thing, and that leads to those types of situations.
Yeah, you know, BMX is funny though in that way, because like on paper, I don't think like any rational BMX or businessman would like, or business person would like get into BMX, right? Like it's a passion thing, you know what I mean? Well, just even in general, it's like it's a pricey, you know, it's not cheap to get a bike, and you put it to the test. So if you have cheap products, they will fail. And it's the type of market where like failure is not really acceptable. Like say like in skateboarding, it doesn't look bad on a brand if you break their deck. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a way of life. But like in BMX, it looks really bad if you break someone's frame. And so it's like this industry is funny in that way, where it's like you cannot have planned obsolescence or whatever, like a lot of industries are afforded, you know, or allowed to do, like every industry basically. It's like, no, you will be heckled out of the industry. It's like, it's a very like high integrity, you know, low profit, sort of like high passion, low turnover, and very specified, you know, market. And, you know, and you trickle down, like, because I've worked for these companies and we really do try to solve this equation, like what is the problem, you know, and I look at it from a lot of different perspectives. And like, say for instance, like for a shop, you know, like a core shop, I just say, because the last one I was in, I mean, there's a bunch, you know, really notable core shops. We have SD Wheelworks here. They're really sick. I can't not say them. But like, we just worked with Mesroll a whole bunch in New York for this Borough Breaker event. And like, for a shop like that to thrive, it's like you have to be so knowledgeable, but also you kind of have to be flexible, and you have to guess right. You know, it's like somebody can come in and want an Ed frame or whatever frame. Oh, but you don't have the color I want. Oh, you don't have the chainstay length. Oh, you don't have the head tube angle or the top tube length. And it's like, it's so difficult for a shop to have something in stock, predict what, you know, there's so many variations to things. You know, it's just very difficult for brands to supply all those options, colors and all those options. You end up sitting with a lot of product. It's really difficult to move it. And it's really specialized. There's, you know, how many offerings of bars and forks and stems and tires, you know, in the market, and like, they're all awesome. You know what I mean? And so it's just it's just a very nuanced industry to thrive in, you know. And I think ultimately, I think like we need to be maybe a little bit more flexible, you know what I mean, and try to be a little bit more open-minded. But I think getting back to your point though, like I think the reason why a lot of people sort of get into the jobs through riding is that it's almost easier to teach the job than it is to teach the riding or like the passion for BMX.
Oh
And so
yeah.
like for instance, like we've had like sales reps, a perfect example. Like a brand could get, you know, it's very common for a brand to hire a rider as a sales rep, or like maybe an older rider or a professional rider, or you know what I mean, like some kind of not professional, like a professional business minded rider or whatever. Like they might have them as their sales rep because it's like they know the product.
Yeah.
And a non BMXer is going to sound very novice to a core shop, Mesroll or SD Wheelworks or, you know, whatever one, Empire or whatever, like, you know, Pusher, like, you know, all those guys they're all savvy and they don't want to talk to people that don't know what they're talking about, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's like you end up, and even in the marketing side, you know, like it's, you know, you need to be able to speak the language of BMX and know, like, classic story is like DC ad back in the day. I don't know if you ever remember, like there's a legendary DC ad that it was like a Doyle photo and they put like the wrong name and then they misspelt the dude's name. And it was like, oh God, I can't even remember who it is. Hopefully people know in the comments, but like there's like it was around the era where Doyle was on DC, and I don't know if it was Doyle or not. There was a guy. Oh, I don't want to get stuck in this, but if I
That's
thought
funny.
about it, I could figure it out. But anyways, DC ran a spread, and it was like some rider that everyone knew, and the last name that was plastered was the wrong name of the rider, and the rider who it was misspelled. And so it was
Oh
like,
no.
and apparently that person got fired or you know, whatever, who knows what happened. But it was like, you know, that's kind of the sometimes the things that can happen with outside things. So I think ideally it would be like a blend, you know, that you would have a mix. You would have someone that has the formal experience, and then you would have them maybe teamed up with people that sort of know the industry or know the culture really well, and then you could, you know, have a organized approach. But you know what's interesting is a lot of times it's like these companies are a lot more garage band or like a lot more like,
Yeah.
you know, grassroots for the love than people think, you know.
That's absolutely true. And to have like that hybrid approach of someone who is experienced but also has the passion, they're experienced enough to know that they're not going to make the same money working for a BMX company as they could go anywhere else,
Totally.
literally anywhere else. So it's like you have to also find there's a third spoke to that wheel, and that you have to
Yeah.
find someone who's willing to like have their passion and their knowledge go together to sacrifice not making as much money because they're helping the brand or whatever their reasoning might be.
Well, you know what's interesting is like BMX gets exposed to those high-end marketing agencies through our content. You
Mm,
know, like Red Bull does all kinds of stuff with BMX, and there's you know, a ton of agencies or just, you know, X Games, you know, in a sense. It's like they want to work with BMX because, you know, if you think about to like the old X Games, there was like Street Luge
yeah.
and sky
Skydiving. Yeah,
surfing or
whatever.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And so, and climbing and all of those sports fell to the wayside, you know, but BMX is hung in there. It's changed a lot over the years, but you know, it's like, it's so there's, I think there's a lot of interest in BMX on the content side and on the lifestyle side, but for the hard good side and the soft good guys, you know, like for the actual core brands in BMX, it's tough to have that level of resources, you know.
Yeah, I think it's gonna the way that rises is by the people who recognize what you're talking about with I hate the word content, but there's no better word
Yeah,
for it.
yeah,
There's literally nothing that works. the people who recognize the want for that content, the people like, for yeah, everybody loves to hate on him, but Nigel recognized the fact that the stuff he was doing with like Gatorade and all of that was desirable, and then went with it. Maybe not people who are that hardcore and to the extent he's gone, but like people who just recognize the potential while also.
Well, he's a perfect example. No, he's a perfect example. Like in the sense that like if you sort of let go of that hardcore concern, that concern to remain pure or whatever, as far as like in the BMX frame, like, and not even to say that somehow makes it sound that Nigel isn't like that. He comes from BMX, but it's like he's willing to work with non-BMX brands and translate our culture in a way that they can digest and that they can display and they can work with and collaborate with.
Yeah.
He's like amazing with that, and that's like he's worked with banks and car companies and luxury brands, and it's like and he's gone. And it's funny too, because it's like it's interesting actually when you think about like the knee-jerk reaction that the industry has towards him. And even like I have to include myself, it's like when I first saw like him doing, I don't know, whatever, it's like, yeah, it's not what other riders are doing, but at the same time, it's fully broadening the horizons of the sport and exposing it. And the sport has it has a mass appeal.
Yeah.
But not everyone's trying to learn bar spins. You know what I mean? But then again, people love art. People love music. They're not trying to be musicians. They're not trying to be artists. You know what I mean? So it's like there has to be something for them that is digestible, as well as, things for the purists that want to see, who's pushing the sport and, these new directions. There's place for everything. But I think Nigel's a perfect example of how like the sport really just needs to loosen up a little bit, and like and that can be easier said than done. And maybe I'm just being naive, like maybe people just don't have the resources or flexibility to be open like that. But it's like I think that would help.
So here's my perspective on it. Just because someone like Nigel exists, and if there were more people like him, does not mean that people like the act like guys who are into what they're into, they are doing it for all of their core, it feels like core reasons. It doesn't mean that can't also exist. I think we just need to be okay with someone like Nigel and more people being like Nigel, and just understand all of it can exist within the same bubble.
Totally. And one thing can lead to the other, it's like, just because I think sometimes the knee-jerk reaction is that people might think because he's getting the attention, that somehow sets the narrative for BMX, like he's what people think of, and maybe they don't like that or whatever, but it's like he's introducing them to it.
Yeah.
And that might be what they first think of. But if they find interest in it, then it's like it's just going to lead to more things. And so, yeah, it's definitely an immature sort of frame of mind. Or I wouldn't even say immature. That's kind of insulting, but it's just, it's just maybe a little bit of a closed-minded.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, there's definitely, room for both to coexist, and both need to be there.
Yes,
because
exactly.
like you need to have that depth, and and like someone like Nigel has just gotten to this place where that's, I think, where his interest lies. I mean, anyone that knows, like where he's come from knows that he's had his years where he was a core rider, like, and did his thing, so it's like he just had those chapters and is doing what he does now. And like, yeah, I definitely would like to see BMX, kind of open up to things. I think they are.
Yeah.
It's in an interesting time though, because, this is kind of a side note, but like, like there was that era of like rider owned companies, where they were just kind of like, there might've been like 10 rider owned brands. And that was like kind of, that created this really strong identity of like what core BMX was. And I think a lot of those brands are starting to age out a little bit, and there's not a lot replacing them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting time. There's a few guys who have stayed in it really heavily, but then there's also probably just as many that you could list that have kind of faded, and there's not a lot new popping up,
Right.
aside from like Rickson. And then the next one beyond that is maybe like Fiend. And how old is Fiend?
Right.
And then it's like Fiend is maybe a decade old, or more,
Talking
It's like,
on that scale for sure. There's definitely in the past few years been a lot of like smaller rider owned companies
yeah,
that come up where they have a run of frames done once every year and they sell out of
yeah.
all of them, and it's not a full-time job for anybody, and it's just there's
Like a
definitely been
like a local demand type of thing.
yeah, or the very niche kind of a
Yeah.
thing. It's kind of a smaller scale than the Fiend or a Rickson or any of those types of things.
Right.
It's very interesting, and I really do think that the heart of the problems that we talk about with that kind of stuff and this whole Nigel and anything like that is just open-mindedness and realizing that even in what Nigel's doing, if there was more people doing that, it just because you work with Mercedes doesn't mean that you have to do something that like one you're not okay with or you don't have any kind of input on the process. Like you can, or even talk about YouTube, making YouTube videos and having a YouTube channel or anything along those lines. Just because you do that doesn't mean you have to do it like the people that have been hated on. You can do it in your own way,
Yeah.
and you can do it with your own format. It doesn't have to be the thing that a lot of people hate.
I don't think I think it's more just, they might be insecure about maybe, their challenges doing their own thing, and then they
Mm,
see Nigel like thriving and he's doing it a different way. And it might just be frustrating either because what they're doing is, they're struggling with it or they're just procrastinating. I think a lot of people sort of struggle with actually taking action, and it's like, and so that I think that's a source of frustration for a lot of people. They see someone like Nigel doing it in a way that maybe they don't think should be possible or successful or whatever. And clearly he's doing his thing, and so it's like, then that's, I don't know.
well,
But I think, like Nigel's not small, like he's one example, he's one example, but I think, I it's tricky. It's tricky just because I know how hard it is to just get rooted as a brand. And like the ones you mentioned, like when you tell me like that there's a lot of like smaller companies out there like that do these one runs, and I go like, how do they sell those? Like I mean, in the sense that I go like, are they marketing on Instagram, or like or are they marketing at local events? And is it more their immediate network of like connections that they've made in the sport? It's just like interesting to me. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Like because I know it's difficult. And so it's like, it's always like a big question mark. Like, where do you put your energy trying to get your brand out there and make people aware of what you're doing,
Yeah, for sure. It's the talking about the insecurity thing too is like I think a lot of people love to talk about what they're going to do, but not a lot of people like to actually do it.
Scary. You know what I mean? In a sense, it's kind of scary. Like totally. It's funny. Like when we did this Borough Breaker event, we had some people like voice, like frustration that they weren't invited, or whatever. And it was like, hey, that's super. It's like, I'm like psyched that you wanted to be invited.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells me, that from what you've seen, it looks fun, or like, it looks like something you wanted to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
But just know that before we were here, we had no idea if it was going to be a success or a flop, the first time. It's just an idea,
Well,
and you try to cover your bases as much as you can. And you try to stack the odds in your favor, like you try to get a good group together. You try to like, so we got like amazing riders who are into it. You got to get a good idea, and it's like, you try to do the legwork. But at the same time, it's like a brand new, or like if you're trying something that has not been done, or you're trying to do something new for yourself, it's like there's way more unknowns. You have to get used to that, and then and also just be like, we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to do our best. There was like one sort of structural thing or like format thing with the Borough Breaker event that came out with like Joe Jarvis's run that I was like, shit, I was like, I wish I would have done something different. But now we're 3 episodes in and I can't change it.
Oh, like while you were in the process of doing it?
Once I got to the editing process, I realized
okay.
like, oh shoot, I wish I would have sort of like format wise, like rule wise, I would have judged something differently.
I gotcha.
And so like specifically what I'm talking about is in the event, well, I don't know if you even want to get sidetracked on stuff like this.
No, that's
like
fine.
If you want to talk more about industry
No,
marketing,
we're good.
Yeah. But like just talking about ideas, how things come together. We wanted the guys going from borough to borough as quickly as they could to do these challenges, but we didn't want them just racing, without stopping. And we wanted them to ride, like you want to see the guys do what they do, And so it's like, okay, best trick along the way gets a 20-minute deduction and best line gets a 20-minute deduction. And then we just kind of elaborated from there. We thought in the moment at that time, like, okay, so it's best trick and best line. So the guys are kind of competing for the best trick and best line. Only one guy gets that deduction, Whereas when Joe Jarvis did his run, he thought of it as like, oh no, this is just my best trick, my best line. And if I do a best trick, then I get a 20-minute deduction. If I do a best line, I get a 20-minute deduction. And it wasn't really like that. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have done it like that because it just would have encouraged each guy to do a line and a trick because not everyone even tried that,
I gotcha.
And so it's like, oh man, in hindsight, I should have, because there was a couple of tricks that like Nordstrom did that grind to bar in the beginning. Like that would have been his best trick. Silva did, he rode that ledge and did a nollie toboggan off. That would have been his best trick. So I was like, it would have actually been cool to call out those clips and they weren't really called out at all. And so like in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I would have had it apply to each rider and not have been just a one-off best trick for all the guys to compete for.
Yeah, I got
And it's like, but I told him, it was like, hey, we'll have everybody go on that same level playing field, and he actually did get the best line. And it's like, and so he did get credit for that, but anyways, it was just one of those things where in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I actually would have done it the way you interpreted it. But now we're 3 videos in and I can't change it. So that's just one of the things for the next time, and stuff like that is bound to happen. And I feel like if you really care about something and you try to think it out and you talk about your ideas with your friends and try to think out the kinks and try to visualize how it would play out, it's like, it'll happen.
You can only do the best that you can do. And
right.
You are absolutely right in taking people being upset that they weren't invited as a compliment, because it is a compliment. Yeah. And to the people who are upset, they can only have so many people. It's not like they made a list and were like, not that guy, not you, definitely not him. Like, obviously, no matter what realm you're in, there's a certain level that can exist, but that is not, I guarantee that's not what you guys are doing. And you would have loved to have 30 people in it, but at the end of the day, you only had room for a certain amount.
No, yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it. And also a huge part too is like, it's the business side of it, in the sense that, we have sponsors that have given us money, to host this event and use their money in a way that they'll be hyped on. Yeah. Basically is what it comes down to. And you just need to make sure that the people you have involved are reliable and know and kind of can pick up on your vision of what you're doing. And also, it's kind of a tricky thing. It's an interesting thing, but it's like when you get to be a rider that has like, sponsors, and you have a certain level of responsibility as an athlete, then you kind of know that language when there's like funding involved, and you kind of can't, it's not your time to play around. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And so And so like you want to get people involved that you kind of can count on, will like know the drill. You know
Well,
what I
being a
mean? Like,
professional, basically
right. Like, hey,
understanding that the
don't
company put them there.
yeah, like, hey, we are all starting at the same time in the same place. Don't be an hour late.
Yeah.
Don't be late. You know what I mean? Like, don't be late. It was like basically, and so it's like, like, and stuff like that. And so it's just, you have to, you have people's money that you're taking and spending essentially. And so it's like, you just have to like not take that lightly and just make sure that you kind of, that's, yeah, that just kind of was part of the thought process when we're thinking about who to invite as well. Not a huge part, but it's definitely a part of it. And what's funny too is like when we heard from some of the people that were like, wanted invites, it was like, oh damn, like that is actually cool, like that you were interested. And we immediately were like, oh, we know how we could increase the rider count. Like next year if we did it, we could just do teams or like
Oh,
have
yeah,
like
there you go.
2 or 3 guys go, and they
Yeah.
can just switch off who's doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's, yeah, and then we're off to a whole different vibe,
And
and so it's like,
you just got me stoked.
well, that's the thing. And so like, yeah, it's like, oh wow. And we thought of, once we heard that feedback, we thought about it for like 5 minutes talking about it, like Demarcus and I was like, oh, we would just do this. Let's just make teams. And I was like, oh shit, that would be sick. And then I was like, done. Like, okay, that's cool. Like, and so then, so there's always those like one idea leads to another, and I think if you're someone who's trying to make something happen too, it's super important to like not get too sensitive and like defensive about your ideas and like too protective. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I have ideas, but then it's usually like loose ideas. Like I know, like, okay, I have a shape of a thing, and then I kind of know to just trust the process. But part of that process along the way is like having people give me feedback, and then you're like, oh, that actually solves an issue, and so then it's like you start filling in those gaps as you go, but you can only do that if you're open to hear people. You know what I mean?
That's a life thing in general, man. Just
Totally.
always being willing to take in new ideas or different ideas and let them modify your own if they're worthy of it. Because without that, it's the echo chamber and it's just all of the same. It's this is the way we've always done this. So this is how we're always going to do it. Yeah, you have to be that way. You brought up something that is something I feel like you're very a good person to talk about this kind of thing, in the responsibility that is attached to something like this Borough Breaker event in being brought out by a company for it. And that I would love to get your thoughts on that side of what you see from professional BMX riders. And I feel like the only people we can really hold accountable in that conversation are the ones who are getting paid or a tremendous amount of product. But I would just love to just go on a tangent and talk about that side of things, because you are the TM, right? You've ran TM jobs. So you know what a rider needs to do as a pro. You also know what you would like to see them do and those types of things. I don't know where we take the conversation, but I would love to in that realm.
Yeah, totally. I think it's funny. I think, well, one thing, so I'll start on like a positive note, is like one thing I can say that I think BMX excels at and thrives at is our professional riders are very cool, like down to earth people that are flexible and easy to work with, and like not insanely demanding, in general. And so like, I've had the opportunity to work with like bigger projects, like say like an Adidas, or I did stuff back in the day with like 100%, like anybody that's like on the moto side. They love working with BMXers, or like, the higher level of athlete you get, it's like, it's just very difficult. There's a lot more things that come into play, with working with people. And it's not a critique on them, but like, But BMXers, on the other hand, are like some of, like, from what I've heard, like when those big companies have to work with BMXers, they're hyped because they're like, oh, they're people are so cool and easy and are like down to do what you need them to do and like get the assignment and aren't like, we didn't agree to left turns, we agreed to only right turns. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, I could, what do you got? What do you need? And they'll knock it out. And it's like, and sort of like, when BMX are like, when people come from the industry, like professionals coming from the BMX industry, go into other things, usually excel. Kind of like what Moeller was saying with like riders that come from BMX that branch out. It's like, it kind of goes for professionals in the industry too. It's like, or like, riders and content people. It's like you branch out and like, riders get to do things with bigger brands or whatever. Like those bigger agencies are usually super hyped on riders.
I feel like I can tell you why.
Well, a lot of times we're excited to have an opportunity, but I think, well, it's, there's not that many opportunities in BMX for those big projects. I mean, why do you think? I'm just curious.
Because a lot of professional riders in BMX don't completely understand their own value. And so when a bigger company will come in and asks for left turns when right turns were only agreed to, a BMX rider doesn't know that they sometimes should be like, hey, no, this isn't what you paid me for. We're going to have to talk about this. They're like, oh, no, we're just going to do what you need, like whatever. And BMX riders are used to, because they don't sometimes fully understand their value, just going with the flow. And like, that's a great thing in some instances, but in others can be bad.
Totally. Well, and that actually is kind of a good segue into like the other side, which is kind of the bad side, which I didn't want to start with.
Yeah.
It was more like the communication and like what is being sponsored. You have that vision when you're a kid and you sort of first hear about the concept. Oh, sponsored means you get free parts and you get paid or some whatever. Payment might not even be part of it. It might just be you get free stuff. And it's like, it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, it is involved, that's involved, but it's like, there's just more to it. And if a lot of times riders will run into issues with that adjustment from being like a privateer to a sponsored rider, if they don't have a good support structure, either with their riding community or like with their family. I've seen guys that go south is like, sometimes if they just don't have people around that can be honest with them, like when they're like gaining success, like, hey, there's certain things you need to do to honor your side of things and make sure you're doing what is required to where people are happy with everything. And a lot of times, like the sad part is a lot of times it's as simple as like, do exactly what you're doing every day, but just have someone point the camera at you and then spend 30 minutes picking out your favorites and you could even just send them to somebody. It might even be that simple. You know what I mean? Like,
literally just make the effort of pushing the send button to the TM or person it goes to.
Unfortunately, like some people just don't have that level of support, or their support is just different. Like their support is like in their corner 100% of the time and like won't be honest with them about like, oh, hey, you should make sure that you give this person a call. Or, like, and as opposed to just having their back if they call or not, then it's like, damn, dude, like simple communication a lot of times would resolve a lot of heartache and headache on that side of things. And that's, I think, why I've gotten the team manager jobs. I mean, I TM for demolition for a couple of years, demolition parts, and then Haro. And then through Haro, it was like Premium and Mozzie. Mozzie was like a road brand that they had, and they had a Haro mountain bike, which was usually like one guy. But we also had like Haro Race, which was like a whole world that I did not know at all anything about when I started. And it was like a real big crash course in that whole world. It's totally different than freestyle. And so like the reason I got those jobs a lot of the times is because I could talk to the riders and I could translate what the companies were after in a way that the riders could hear and understand, you know what I mean? And vice versa. I could tell the companies what the concerns were from the riders and why they might be reluctant to do something that was being asked of them. You know what I mean? And both of those sides are huge, and so like, and that's been a big, I think, something big that I bring to the table is that like I have been on the company side enough to know their struggles, and I also know what the priorities are for the rider and what they care about, and then
Yes.
making sure everybody's able to work together and be happy is like the name of my job, basically. And yeah, and then try to make things profitable at the end of that.
So what I think the underlying issue also is that not enough riders are teaching the next people or teaching people in general that they need to be conscious of these things. Like the concept I think of is like, if you don't know that you should be doing these things and you aren't told that, like you can't know something until you learn it or are
Yeah.
or experience it, or you lose out on something because you didn't do it. And then if the communication isn't there, that is why you're losing out. So what I think we need in BMX are more people explaining what these riders need to be doing to move up and whatever, because you can't, the days of just riding your bike well are, and that being all you have to do, are gone.
Sure. No, I think, well, and a lot of companies are really proactive with trying to figure out what works.
Yeah.
It's just, it's challenging. You know what I mean? Like it used to be, if you did shop stops and you went around, that those shops would really be strong dealers for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But, if I think honestly, I think nowadays what really is more of the challenge that people might underestimate is just the overall financial, like economic struggles. You know what I mean? Where it's like people just might not have as much, extra cash to spend. And it's like you can't, no amount of marketing and no amount of content is going to make people spend money they don't have. You know what I mean? I mean, sometimes they can, but like it's just that's I think a challenge sometimes that we might need to consider more, which I don't know what the solution is to that. It's not like you could just stop selling stuff, but it's just like,
Well,
you get the challenge too.
that magnifies. So if, like, obviously that's real and there are definitely, there's, yes. And that also magnifies the problems of the wrong types of marketing that happen, because then you're not getting in front of the few people who are actually willing to spend some money. So like, not saying any specific examples or anything like that, but like if there are less people who are willing to spend money or can spend money, and then you don't get your stuff in front of those people, then you're even worse off. And it's a huge, hard, complicated problem.
Right. You can't let off the gas like when things are slowing down as far as like the marketing side. Yeah. No, it's a challenge, and yeah, it's not it's it's not always that obvious like what the solution is,
It's very not
It's just not an
obvious.
easy solution is kind of what I think. And yeah, I do think I actually I am encouraged by the discussion that bigger and gnarlier might not always be better. You know what I mean? In terms of like the marketing side. And like I've heard this now for several years, but I'm hearing it like more and more, and you guys are talking about it and you and Moeller were talking about it. And it's like I think there has to be more thought placed on, the lifestyle side and
Yes.
not strictly the core, how core something is and what the banger is. You know what I mean? I think that, like, obviously there's a place for that stuff. 100% there is a place for that stuff and you need that stuff there. But I think everybody knows, and I think what people are like feeling like there's a room for and that there's a need for is like there's so much more to BMX than just that. You know what I mean? And like there's people in every scene in every state that like are genuinely interesting people that ride in interesting ways and probably deserve some level of coverage or like a little mini docu-series, or like, you know, there's all kinds of things. I think there's a lot of depth in riding that hasn't been really explored, or like, you know, and I think, you know, somehow there's value, you know, somehow there's like, and that's kind of where like low number stuff came to, you know, it's like we want to try to help, you know, show people what this thing is in different ways that is unique, you know, and like, hey, this thing is cool and there's a lot more to it, you know, than just, you know, the gnarliest tricks. And I think that becomes a way bigger thing as you get older, you know, like I just
Yeah.
turned 40. So like I'm not doing like my gnarliest stuff anymore, you know, and so you start to look at the different aspects of like why you love riding. And I think most people probably look at it this way, like why you love riding is not necessarily how dangerous you're pushing it,
Well,
but you know.
let's flesh this fully out. This is going to be cut out in its own video and as part of this, because this is perfect to talk
Cool.
about. So what I'm feeling and what you're saying too is also the fact that you can pretty safely say there are way more people out there riding BMX who are only concerned with just going out there and having fun than there are people who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible and the next craziest, whether it's a technical thing or a banger or burly, gnarly, whatever. So the fact that what's mostly happening, like when you talk about marketing in BMX, the only real marketing that we see is like edits and videos like that, because that's kind of all that happens aside from the few small things here and there. So like if a gnarly crazy edit is kind of like all that's out there, and that the people who just go enjoy going and riding and having fun will watch it, but afterwards, like, well, that was crazy. And some of them might be like, well, I want to buy that person's thing now, but most of them don't. It's like, okay, so now what do we do to get in front of those people or the normies out there who don't even ride yet and just see a pump track pop up in their town and don't even think anything of it, you know?
I think it's a matter of, you know, these brands, when they're trying to market an item or like a product or a rider, and they use a video to do it, ultimately they're just trying to get the most attention they can get on that product.
Yeah.
To try to gain as much brand awareness and product knowledge as they can for that item and for them, for their company, you know? And so that, I think the thing that has probably gotten them the most feedback and the most return on that effort is like bangers, you know what I mean? And so like whatever the craziest video is. Now there has been a change, you know, like YouTube definitely opened that up, because, you know, like vloggers, you know, you could do a vlog style video and get more views than like a banger edit, you know? And so I think that is changing things. And I think what we need to do is, you know, be very vocal basically about the content we like. You know what I mean? If you're a viewer and you like a certain type of content, you like a certain type of riding, like don't just watch it. Like you gotta like
Oh, I gotcha.
be a
Leave the
squeaky wheel,
comment.
dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
comment, or like like it and comment, or message the people. Like let them know that you liked it, or like let the brands know, like, hey, you guys sponsored this thing. It's sick. Like, thank you. You know, like
Yeah.
that sounds silly, but it's not though. And it's like a huge thing that like reaffirms that they're putting their money in the right place. And like if you want content that isn't just strictly insane, crazy, death defying, whatever, then, you know, then make noise when you see it. You know what I mean? And like give these companies some indication that they're onto something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like, and that is going to be, because believe me, like companies want to do what people are going to respond to. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I'll tell you right now, a banger edit is the worst investment, time and money
Oh,
investment
yeah.
that you can make, because it might take, you know, if you know, like say a Dennis video. I mean, like, you know, I'm not saying that investing in a Dennis video is bad. I'm saying that Dennis will take like a year of traveling all over the place to accumulate a banger video.
Because he has
And
to. Yeah.
right. Well, you have to, like, you can't do the same spots, even if it's a big trick. People don't want to see the same spots in San Diego. Like, you got to get out of your backyard, and all those guys are dedicated and know that. But from a sponsor perspective, like Vans, I mean, like, I think Dennis's latest videos got a ton of views. So like Vans is like, that's money well spent. Nobody's upset about it. But it's not easy, is what I'm saying.
And that doesn't happen
like,
every single time for everyone.
right. It's not like to just say like, hey, Dennis, go out and deliver us a banger. Like, I mean, I see my friend basically on some of those clips. I'm like, damn, like you kind of like, all right, like you did it. You're going to film another one. Like, okay, shit. Like like you realize like the risk level and is, just those banger videos are not easy to come by is the message there. And so it's not the go-to for a brand to have their riders do the banger video to promote whatever they're promoting. They do that because that's what gets the attention, or that's when they hear the most return.
Right.
And so it's like, hey, if you guys want to see different stuff, like, it's not that you want to hate on that stuff. It's just like, if you see them do, oh, we got an Airbnb in Lisbon and we're doing like a thing, it's a little bit different style. It's like, oh, you guys got to let them know, like, that's sick. Or like even the outlets, like, it just has to be, I think, a organized effort to push in the direction. We need to set the narrative,
and,
you know what I mean? And so like in the companies, believe me, like even, I mean, like some of the best things, and it's a double-edged sword, but like I remember when social media became more prominent and riders were able to market or promote themselves without having to kind of like do magazine level clips or video level clips every single time, which is what it used to be, like like when I was riding more, I was riding for brands or whatever, it's like, if you're going to try to get content, it's like, no, you got to go, you're going to shoot something for the magazine. It's got to be that level, or you're going to film something for a video. It's got to be that level. Whereas like Instagram's like, oh, we can go out and jib at the ledges, put together a cool cut, and people love it. And they see our personality. So I think in that way, it's like, it's going that way. But I think, I think the more vocal we can be about wanting to see, the lifestyle side, if brands get the response that they're looking for, they'll just do more of it,
Yeah. And I think the companies also, and BMX as a whole, we need to open our ears to listen to when that feedback does come in, to see it and then act on it, rather than like, oh, cool, that one got a bunch of views and comments on it, cool, and then you forget about it.
I will say another thing though, to add to it and to kind of give a little bit of slack to the brands, to the hard, because it's like, a lot of these brands, it's like, we're talking about, content to engage an audience, a huge audience, core people, more general interest people. And it's like, but these guys are selling frames and wheels and tires, you know what I mean? Like in the sense that, like, I think sometimes there's a tendency to lean on them too much to set the narrative of the industry. Like, I think they're obviously a huge part of it, but I think BMX would benefit from some kind of like, that's shameless promotion. That's part of like what Low Numbers is, where it's like, oh, we want to do collaborations and projects and figure out a way to make that profitable, but that's something that's not reliant on hard goods and soft goods sales to facilitate. You know what I mean? Like, those guys, it's a difficult thing, you're science. So I'm hearing
I'm gonna say something controversial, and there's gonna be some upset people when I say this, but you're doing what BMX media is supposed to do and doesn't.
True. I mean, but BMX media at this point, I mean,
that's kind of the point of it, right? Like, to bring value to yourself, to the companies, you should be doing things that bring value to them by the audience that you've amassed, and not just only reposting videos and clips on the internet and then writing a little paragraph a couple sentences about it. Like when you have access to all of these big riders, you know, and I'm stoked to see Billy Perry working with you and Demarcus to do this Borough Breaker thing under low numbers. And forgive me for not knowing fully everything about low numbers. I might say something wrong, but like, then you take into consideration you mentioned the game of bike. I didn't even remember that was low numbers that was doing that. Like that, you guys did that so fast and so good, and it got so much attention that I saw that and I was like, hey, BMX Media, it's in your neck of the woods. Like in that, like, come on, all you had to do was just organize it and film it and make it happen. These guys just came in and did it, and it blew up like everyone would expect it to.
I think, you know, it's like, who do you think of, you know, like when you think of BMX Media, it's tricky, you know, like I think of Dig and Hour are like, you know, the main guys I think of. And I don't know the internal structure there, but I do know that it's not a massive amount of guys, you know what I mean? And so like, it's tricky because I think, you know, yeah, I mean, there was a time, and like the same guys were involved. Like, you know, there was a time though where the industry was doing a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And it was the same people, still Dig, it was still Ride, which I mean is now Hour, but like Fudger was there, you know, and so like they know the world that like facilitates the sport, or like they know they know a situation in which they are facilitating, you know, the sport and the narrative and all those things. I can't pretend to know like what their struggles are, you know what I mean? Or like where their resources are sort of limited, or like, I mean, you know,
that's real too. You have to acknowledge that.
I can't put too much on them in the sense that like, I don't really know what challenges they face, you know what I mean? So like, ideally, you're right though. Like you're right. I think about people hate to make the association, but it's the closest we have is like, you know, or you could say the same thing with mountain bike. I was going to bring up skateboarding, but we could say the same thing about mountain bike. Like mountain bike has Pink Bike. Pink Bike does a lot of stuff, but mountain bike also has like Red Bull, and Red Bull I think has committed a lot. It's tricky, but I was going to say, you know, like skateboarding has, they have like, you know, outlets like Thrasher that are doing a lot of things on their own, and then they're also hosting a lot of brand content, and they are bringing a lot of the industry together.
That's probably why they're successful, right? Because they're putting the work in to do it, you know?
Totally. So I mean, it's tricky because it's like, it's one of those things that I can't really pretend to know like how you would go about doing it, like what their business model is. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know. Like
either way, take that out of it.
Way.
Like
it is a good.
Well, it's just like if they weren't gonna do it, and I've been bitching about this for years because I'm one dude who also has a part-time job. I live in Ohio, and I'm covering all these events. I'll post up games of bike and things like that and do all this stuff that takes me like, it's normal effort. And like, I do so much in my life too. And it's like, this is people's job, and they're around all these people. And it's like, well, why can't you do it? So it's like, if it was only a matter of time before somebody recognized the potential to do something like that. And I gotta say too, the game of bike that you guys did, I guess it's championship, was such an awesome thing that has needed to happen and could continue to happen in so many different realms all over everywhere, that like what you immediately did is that you brought value to the low numbers name and whoever's associated with it, that's going to make BMX brands want to put their money instead of into repost land. They see that and they maybe be like, hey, this is getting hundreds of thousands of views. And if we put our name on this or send a rider to be involved with this, immediately that associates us with it. And that is potentially better advertising.
I think it's another source. You know what I mean? Like,
and I don't want to put anybody down by saying that, but that's just the reality of how business works. If somebody gets, that's just it.
I think it's different. I do see what you're saying. And I think, like right now, it seems like, there's more effort sort of put on their end. It's like, the focus is more on like current event and covering what's happening. And that might be with events that are taking place, and then, or it might be with clips that are getting posted online and they're reposting it. Where our focus is, like trying to create these events to generate interest and content and, things for people to get into. So it's just kind of a different approach. I mean, I think ideally, perfect world, you had the resources to do both, and I think that's kind of what it like, when they had the magazines, it was a lot, they had that outlet, and I'm sure they had a whole office and they probably had tons of staff, but it's like, they were able to do current events, but they also had the outlet of the magazine to do more long form stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's what you said about the game of bike is, was what we were thinking. I have to give credit to Dennis. Like Demarcus and I were already talking about wanting to do something with low numbers and have it be like a collaborative, like an entity that just did collaborations with different people. So Dennis coming to me with this idea to do a game of bike like tournament on his channel was perfect timing, basically. Because I was like, oh yeah, if I could do it under low numbers, this would be like a launch. And we had done some smaller things before that, but that was definitely like the starting point, like a perfect launch pad for like what low numbers is. And the thing is too, is like, I think for an event like, or for a outlet like low numbers to maybe serve that purpose of being like a valuable source of content where people can go and advertise and do that stuff, I think we need to be more selective and be more project based. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I think with Dennis's channel, a big part of the success of the games of bike were like, those were only coming out once a week.
Yeah.
And then we would have like one maybe prediction video or one reaction video in between. But the fact that was just like one main video a week, like they really had legs and they really they had a ton of traction. And I wonder, we did talk with Fudger, for instance, about doing something with Our, like they reached out really quick, like they are very responsive to that stuff. And we were trying to figure out a way to try to like tick that box and like have Our be involved. Where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. But like we had thought, like when we were talking with them, about maybe doing another one, like, what would it look like if we posted it on Our? It's like, my concern was like, well, there's a huge frequency of posts, on those pages or on those accounts. And so then it's like, does that help or hurt an event like the game of bike? Would it get lost in all of that feed? Or would it have the same sort of time? Like, would it have the same shelf life that it would have on an account that doesn't post as much?
That's a YouTube question for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think,
I was just going to say that's like an algorithm type thing. And
That's true.
What you'd relate that to with like Dennis's channel and how that did so well is like when you think about the format, even today, a lot of TV shows will go out the whole series on Netflix. But when you look at like Disney and some of the Marvel TV shows and things like that, and some of the biggest shows ever and stuff that's still on TV today, I know if I tune in at this day, this time, it's once a week and this is when it comes out.
Right.
It's an event. You've turned it from being just this thing that happens every day, you expect whatever, into this is an event that people are excited to look forward to. And it's kind of capturing a little bit of that old print media excitement of, I know that this is coming this time of the month. It's kind of a similar vein, even though it's radically different.
but you're right. And that's like, that was a big part of our thought process in wanting to do these events. And I mean, ultimately, we would love, I don't know if you ever tune into, I think it's called the Circle of Balance. It's that event that Red Bull does in New
I
Orleans.
heard about it, but I haven't really seen anything.
So like when I was working at Haro, I was watching because Matthias was competing. I mean,
Yeah.
like I should have been watching anyways just to support the sport, but I was watching, and I was watching as Haro and like commenting as Haro, like,
Mm.
but live.
Oh yeah, that's
And it
cool.
was awesome. And it
Yeah.
was like we were commenting with Red Bull, I was commenting with like all these people, and like we were just like going back and forth, and like, and you get a chance to like show support for the other riders. And it was like, man, this is sick. Like I'm not there, but it's kind of like I'm there, and people are there. Like it's a ticketed venue. So I think in a sense it's like, perfect. Like I think like aspirations for low numbers would be like a blend between that and like a street league, where we're able
Mm.
to like go in, have our own thing at our own big venue, and like it's all hosted by BMX, and we have like, special consideration for the core side, but we also have been able to incorporate, the corporate side that you need as well. It's a
Yeah.
balance on all of that. So um I think that would be like, building to something like that would be a dream, or it's an ultimate goal, I should say. And so, and again, to kind of go back to like the current media, it's like it's just hard because it's like if you are focusing on the day-to-day stuff, does that dilute the bigger projects? And how do you balance those? You know what I mean? And like, and are you better off creating them or covering them? And it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, low numbers in the two big events that you guys have done so far very much so prove that you can create it, and it's a lot of work to do it. I know that everything you guys were doing was a lot of work, but you don't have to start at that point, and
No,
you definitely can just like
you can ease into it. We were gonna ease into it actually, up until Dennis hit us up with the idea, and then it was like, yeah, we hit the ground running. But originally, it was gonna just be, a slow start and just kind of build into stuff.
I have a question too about the low numbers thing. So how I don't know how to ask this because you did the Game of Bike on Dennis's channel, you
Yeah.
did the Borough Breaker on Billy's channel. So like, how does that hurt the growth of low numbers as an entity to not have this thing that you guys like own where stuff exists?
Possibly, I wouldn't say it hurts it. It's just trying to set. We're deliberately trying to set a tone of being willing and flexible to think outside the norm.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And yeah, and so like you're right though. I mean, as we're getting into this event, or as we're doing this Borough Breaker event, and like, getting towards the end of it, it's like, okay, maybe some of the next stuff we should think about doing on our own channel. You know what I mean? And it's like we're building, like I've noticed it, like even on our Instagram, it's only a couple months old, and it's growing, and it's got a modest following, but it's like
I'm gonna
I
follow it right now.
noticed. Well, it's, I don't even know. It's maybe like 1,700 people. It's not much. But my point is though, is like I noticed through posting this event, like the promo stuff, that it's like I don't need to collaborate with people to get the same likes and engagement that I was getting earlier,
Hmm.
only through those collaborations. It's like now I could just post strictly to low numbers. You're like, oh, actually, it got a few thousand views. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, that's actually pretty decent. And you see it building on the Instagram side, and like, okay, if we start doing events, we already have ideas already for like smaller, maybe not 10-week long, big
Yeah.
drawn out things, but little more like niche, just fun, little like spontaneous things. And that stuff I do think, is smart to grow our channel with. And so like I think we have like 2 videos on our channel right now, and it's like obviously the focus was really just kind of coming out with a bang, and also just trying to set this tone of like collaboration with different outlets, and also just trying to like collaborate with people and like
Yeah.
get different filmers in the mix, like try to get different advertisers together. And it's been cool, like with the Borough Breaker event, you know, we have Rixon, but we also have Odyssey and Sunday and Kink. And it was like, okay, how do we balance this? Like, you know, we want to make sure that one bike sponsor isn't diluting another. And does it look weird? Typically speaking, like in formal events, you don't usually do that. You have like
title sponsor.
Well, you would have a title sponsor, but like, say you have a title sponsor, it's a drink sponsor. You wouldn't go after any other drink sponsors.
Right.
They would be your guy. If you had a shoe sponsor, you wouldn't go without any other shoe sponsors because you don't want to like step on their toes.
Yeah.
And the same thing for parts and frames and bikes and
like the UFC, the official sports drink of UFC.
It's almost like a rider. It's almost like a rider. A rider's not going to have two. So, but in this case, it was like, well, each week is different, you know, and so like, and then it was like, you know, when we were talking to the brands about it, they were savvy. They were like, no, we look at it. It's like a magazine, you know, like magazines, we were able to all advertise in magazines and it didn't hurt us. You know, you each have your own slot in your own time for attention. And that's it, you know.
I got my marketing brains turning. I got a couple thoughts on this. So first, I don't want to get sucked into too much these individually before going through all of them. But the first thing, you're talking about your own channel and all of that. What I would say would be an awesome approach to that would be like bouncing off of channels. So you do Billy's channel 1 week, and then, all right, next time you guys can find us on the Low Numbers channel, or however you format that, because then you're pushing people on YouTube between channels, which the algorithm really, I always bring up the Paul brothers when talking about this concept, because that's how they blew up their channels in the beginning, was that they're pushing their subscribers back and forth between their channels. And that's what helped them to blow up.
That's super interesting. No, because there has been opportunities actually to expand on the content from these events, but a big concern was diluting the channels.
Well, there you go. You put the behind the scenes on the Low Numbers channel.
Totally, exactly. And we wanted to do this next time. We're trying to set up another tournament with Dennis, another Game of Bike tournament. And so, like I wanted to do a whole reaction series where I got a group of people together to react to each videos and watch, because what was really interesting actually was the group of people that went to those games, like went to the schools and watched them. It kept growing. And the people that were like, Nathan and I had like a running bet. We had like actual cash bets going like on each game. Just because you get into it first off. I mean, I don't know if I say that, but like we get into it first off, and then, but like there's so much nuance to those games and so much strategy involved. And like we knew specific moments where riders blew it, or you're like, we saw how a rider played, and I was like, oh man, they need caddies like in golf. They need to have like someone in their corner, like in boxing.
Yeah.
You got to do this. You got to do that.
Oh,
like, you have to have there's a room to have like a team, like a corner, because some riders don't know how to play.
Yeah.
Like, they're so talented, but their trick selection was all wrong. And you're like, fuck, like, oops, can you cuss on your team?
I don't care.
Anyways, yeah. So I was like, man, like they can beat this person, but they're playing the game the wrong way, and they lose.
Who was it? Was it Demarcus doing the same trick every time, and he kind of screwed himself over in one of those games?
Yes.
And I was watching it, and I was like, bro, you need to try a different trick. You could win this.
Marcus is going to get mad. No, he's not going to get mad. No, he's not going to get mad about this, but we have definitely gotten into heated discussions about this. And I will say his side of it, because what I understand his side to be. I'm not going to speak for him, but specifically in the game with him versus Chad, there was a moment towards the end of the game where he was calling out a line, and based off previous games Chad had made, he was calling out, it's very technical, but it was basically a hard 180 into a grind.
Yeah.
And earlier in the tournament, when Chad had played Colin, Chad had canceled hard ways into grinds for Colin because he said, I'm not good at that trick.
Yeah.
I say hard way into grinds is canceled for Colin. And that was another little thing that was controversial, was canceling tricks. Like a lot of people are like, that's bogus, but it was such a fun talking point that it's like, yo, it was so worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
And this is and it led to the depth of the game, because here's Chad canceling out this trick for Colin. And then later on, Demarcus is setting a line where he's starting with that trick, but then he added another very difficult trick after that. And he pulled the first trick that we're very confident Chad would have a lot of trouble with.
Yep.
And then went and did the second trick and messed that up. And our thing was like, you could have separated those, done the first one as one thing, done the second one as another thing. Demarcus's perspective, or at least what he's told me, is that, going up against somebody like Chad, you can't let off the gas, and like you can't play it conservative. You have to assume he's going to pull it. And so he was just trying to pad it and like stack one hard thing on another. So that is what, as far as I understand it to be, that was his. But when I was watching the game play out, I watched players play conservative, but keep the pressure on by landing their tricks.
Yeah.
Like anyone who's watching this, setting your trick is the most important thing in winning a game of bike. If you are missing your own tricks, you are beating yourself and you're handing your opponent the game. You cannot, your trick selection is so important because you cannot afford to not land your set trick.
Yeah.
You have to keep the pressure on, even if it's a basic trick, because they could still screw it up, and you're still making them do something where if you tried a very technical trick and you don't pull it, they don't even have to do anything. They get 2 tries in a row to give you letters for free. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to do anything. And it's like, that's the worst thing you could do, is pick a trick that is too hard and you're going to struggle with, and then they just get free tries one after the other to stack letters on you. And that's the big thing.
Yeah. I watched that one with Demarcus and Chad, and I was like, dude, you can beat him. You just got to stop trying the same tricks and such hard tricks. Either way, we don't need to get too far into the weeds on that.
To his credit too, I only think he tried like 2 rounds of doing that. I don't think he spent a ton of time. And that was probably internally, that was probably our favorite game of like the whole event, like Dennis and myself and everybody. I mean, like, I guess I can't speak for Dennis, but that was one of the most exciting ones to be at. Like, was the one between Dennis and Demo, or Chad and Demo, was so good from the onset. It was so good, and like it was just fun to be there.
And he pulled out some tricks that was like, I didn't know he could do that, and he nailed them. And it was so awesome. Either way, I want to keep going because I have some more stuff I think could potentially help with this. So that concept of back and forth between channels, and then I remember a long time ago on the Come Up TV, Catfish made this comment about how BMX needs to do events and things. And he used the UFC as a comparison, but he's like, not by like fighting, but the storytelling aspects. And he's absolutely right in that. So what you could do and help with these bouncing off of channels things is the backstory, like how the UFC is telling these fighters stories of like, I grew up and I trained all this and whatever. And like, not necessarily the same thing for riders, but like some type of thing that makes people emotionally attached to this rider because they can either see themselves in them, or they just get invested in wanting to see them win and do well because they identify with them for whatever reason. And that's the kind of thing that you could put on there on the low numbers channel, or however you format it, that can keep people bouncing back and forth. And, not everything's going to get the same numbers as the actual event. But
Yeah,
I think it's a good way to keep that moving. There was
totally.
one other thing that I can't remember now. That's why I wanted to get them all out and Kate couldn't remember.
You know what's interesting too, and it was kind of a concept that we talked about when we first, and and it could help the sport. I don't know like how we deliver this, or like it's just an idea though. When we first talked about the game of bike with Dennis, our initial approach was to crowdfund the whole thing and not
Mm-hmm.
have any sponsors involved. And we thought if we could crowdfund it and pay for it, like God, that simplifies the process so much. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't put any pressure on the companies to have to pay advertising unless they wanted to, which is what happened with those games. Like companies came to us wanting to advertise. So it was like really great, like in that way. You could like what UFC did basically, and this was our example, was like, man, it's like when we first announced that trying to do a crowdfunded thing, people had like a knee-jerk reaction, like what, like should we be paying for events to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we should be paying for? Like, shouldn't sponsors pay for that? And like, yeah, sponsors do pay for it, but like think about like that whole question, that whole series of like responses that we got when we announced that led to this thought process of like, well, think about every other major sport that there is.
Yep.
Like they all charge money to watch it in some way.
And they
You
have
either have to,
sponsors.
well, they have sponsors,
Yeah.
but they have ticket sales that lead to merch, that they have like licensing deals, where like,
Yep.
oh, NFL is exclusively on ESPN and ESPN Plus, and it's like and people have to pay for ESPN Plus, or they have to pay for cable to get ESPN. And so it's like, you guys, I mean, people, I don't know if they realize it. I mean, they definitely do if they're going to games, but even if you're not going to games, even if you're just watching it, you are paying into this sport that money is a huge revenue stream that BMX just doesn't even have. Like freestyle, I should say, like USA BMX race, they do, because they get dues and they have entry fees and stuff. But like on the freestyle side, there's very little funding of that. And so it did bring up the thought. I was like, man, if there was a way we could create a vehicle, it's still something, where like people were able to confidently pay into something that they knew was going to produce these events that they really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And it facilitated the whole industry. Because you could look at UFC. Like UFC was not a network sport. It never was.
Yeah.
It was all pay-per-view. And so like if those pay-per-view numbers were nothing, it would have never been a sport. It would have been a fly by night thing, flash in the pan situation. But the numbers were so big that, the audience spoke basically, and they were able to just keep doing it. And that's why they have like those huge payouts, and it's like, so like if there was a way, I do still think like that's something that BMX could benefit from, if there's like, if it's low numbers, or if it's something else where it's like, oh man, you could pay into this thing and it helps facilitate street league style BMX event that you get to follow every year. And now all the pros are able to, it'd be a snowball effect,
I
because
already know the answer.
What's that?
I already know the answer.
What's that?
So first I want to say the concept, I think there's a lot of people in today's day and age who understand paying for their entertainment. Even though YouTube exists and things are free, I think there's a lot of people who already get it. I think we can thank OnlyFans a little bit for that.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people, because when I do my news live stream, people donate super chats and things because I'm bringing something of value to them and they want to support that. So we're slowly shifting to a structure where people get it. But I think the answer to this, and there's a lot of work that would have to be done first, because you'd have to have the value for someone to do it. But it is like what you see some YouTube people do. There's a channel that I watch. They're based in California, called Corridor. They have a channel called Corridor Crew. They made their own website where you pay $4 a month and you get access to longer versions of their YouTube videos, but also full series and concepts that they don't put on YouTube at all. So
Right.
what would make sense if there could be enough of something where maybe you have shorter episodes or something that go on YouTube. It's like, all right, now if you pay the $4 a month for what you
Right.
would be getting from that, and then
Right.
because and the reason I didn't even say what I was trying to say before, but the reason why UFC is able to have these huge sponsors and everything and still like they get paid by the sponsors. So they're funded by sponsors and by people who are paying to watch.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the reason why all that gets to exist is because it's people, that many people want to see this thing. When you make something at that level, enough people want to see it that they're willing to pay. And I think you're absolutely right. There is room for this in BMX. And you could go so far as if you have this video platform, you license props, and you pay $4 a month. You pay a licensing fee to props, and you can watch props online anytime you want because you pay for it. You do all this stuff, and people would pay, and it would be a platform, whether it's an app, website, whatever.
Well, and I mean, it would that I you know, if all those elements come together, yeah, that's when you would have the resources to, yeah, because it just made me think. I'm like, man, what if there was a website that had all like the best archived BMX videos? Like you could watch Dirty Deeds and you can watch, Criminal Mischief and
Yep.
Nowhere Fast, and then name off your favorite, brand full length and the new ones too. But it's like you would need the resources. You need to be able to pay those guys some kind of a licensing agreement or
Yeah.
whatever that is. And so it's like it would just build into that, but it really would be awesome. I mean, like there, and so that's it. Like I think if BMX would benefit a lot from there being some kind of, outlet like that, if it's a media outlet or just something else, a third idea, that is like help bringing those elements together, you know what I mean? And like help, because it's like, yeah, if you're able to get, you don't want to just pay for it. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you want to be able to thrive and grow, right? And
Right.
that's when you're able to take action on ideas like, oh, let's build a BMX library, like a Netflix for BMXers that could just go and watch every props. Because
Yep.
what's funny is like the original, like this is super random, but it would be so sick if you were able to get every props back to issue one. Like that made me think back to like the Ride office. When Ride magazine had an office, they had like a video room, and in there they had every props, and like the first props had like how to install cranks. It's
Mm,
like one of the segments, it was like sick little interviews and events. And then it was like how to install a bike part, and it was like, it was just cool to see that stuff, and to have like a central place to easily access that stuff, I think would be sick. And, yeah, if you could get viewer pay-in or like buy-in as well as sponsorship buy-in, you have those views to bring all that together, then it's like you know, you're really doing it then, and I think like everybody that knows BMX knows like there's a room for this. There's room for this, and so
mm-hmm.
like hopefully, that, yeah, like that would be, is definitely a goal and a direction to take BMX. And I would love to somehow just be able to have the forethought and the resources to like document like the missions, like filming missions sometimes,
Yeah.
like
Right.
I have a story or like a story that I always tell, and like people that know the video, like, uh, I mean, hopefully they're hyped on it. It's cool. I think like, so when they were filming Market Zero, for instance, I always thought, man, if we were able to document this, I think people would freak out
Oh,
that this
for
happened,
sure.
because it was like, so you're like a guerrilla film crew that goes in and does these. We were doing a pretty high production thing
Yeah.
with no permits, no money really, like total skeleton crew with the boys and doing crazy shit. And like, so like there was one night we were in, I want to say we're in New Mexico, and it was like we were in the market motorhome, and like Dennis's dad was there, and it was like Rob and Christian and Dennis and Jonas and like everybody, like all the main dudes, we were on this trip, and we went into this school because Dennis, there was like a purple kinked rail with a bank, and Dennis did tail whip over into the bank, and it was the same spot where Rob did the wall ride and pulled over that kinked rail into the bank. It was like bangers for both of them, and it was at night. And you go in there at night, you go get dinner, you go at night, and it's like it was like a Tuesday night too. So like there was school, and then it was like we go in there, we set up a generator, a bunch of lights, you have a photographer there, filmers there, multiple cameras, like you have Dennis, like this fucking, next level rider, like, squaring up or sizing up this handrail, this hop. He gets his shit done pretty quick because he's dialed. Photo comes out, clip comes out cool. Rob's trick, we had to like unbolt the rail that was against the wall, and we hide the rail in case the cops come. We kind of like hide the evidence a little bit. He's really sweating it because it's like you don't know if you're going to get the anti-pop. So we're like setting up like little fake setups to like get him like to watch and like kind of get him in the frame of mind to send it. Like, is he going to send it? You're all working on this project for like months, and you're in this school like middle of the night with like lights and generators. And then finally he comes time to like send it, and you're like, okay, like, is everyone ready? Shots, test shots, like do everything, prep as much as you can. Get it. He pulls it. Everyone celebrates, it's like you see the footage, it comes out awesome. And then you put the school back together again, bolt everything back up, clean it, make it like you were never there, break everything down, haul the generator and the lights back into the rig, and then you're gone. And then at 7 a.m, the janitor shows up to open up the school and start the day, and you're like, and we were like, dude, would anyone ever believe like that whole thing just took place from the time in between the time they left work yesterday and they got back to work this morning? It's like, I don't know. I feel like that type of stuff is like, that's the stuff that I would love to watch, like guys go on missions like that,
And think about it this way too. So if you were able to have this platform that had people sign up for it and they paid per month, and you were able to pay to have that documentation of riding documented in a professional way that makes this like short documentary of this night and give it a clever name and whatever, like pitch it to people this way. If you had the ability to go into a room in your house and sit down, and there was a TV, and you could put on any props video, or you could put on any of these crazy things, or a behind the scenes from a insane night filming with Dennis and Rob, and all you had to do is pay $4 a month to be able to do that anytime you want.
Yeah.
Who in BMX would not be stoked on that?
Right. No, I think you're right. I mean, I think people would be. And so it's just a matter of, having people that have like the time to organize and to follow through on stuff like that. It's a lot of work. And so we're getting it. This has all been, every step we've taken further into all this has just been more and more motivating, and like, I was awkward reaching out to Bobby, wanting to be on his podcast and talk to him, but like I kind of got over it. I was like, I'm just going to ask, and then it was like, all right, that worked out. But it's like, got a ton of feedback and got a lot of people like with ideas and just input on, like it does seem like people want to see it, and it's like, and there's not a lot of critique, and it does seem like people are willing to engage with that stuff. And so it's just been, each step we've taken further into this has just been more motivating and more motivating. And that's why I was like, and then I've been a fan of Moeller and I like your channel and like everything that you cover, and then, mixed with the riding videos. And so it was like watching your channel more. And then you started talking about the marketing stuff, and I'm like, man, I got to hit him up and just try to like get in there and just, just try to like keep the momentum going, and like right now it's like, it's definitely in a precarious stage because it's like, we're not making any money doing this, but at the same time, we're lucky enough that we have other things going on that we don't need it to make money.
Yeah.
But it's like, but that can only last for so long, and so it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, this has been super motivating. And like, it does get tedious. We're like, man, it takes a lot of energy with this, be 10 edits total. And it's like, okay, for this whole event, the Borough Breaker event. And so it's like, that's a lot of work. And, you hope at some point you're able to build it into something that is able to pay for itself and facilitate and grow. And it's like, it's not a get rich thing, but it's really just like, oh, let's see if we can build this into something that really kind of like, helps bring things together, and create a bit of an industry, that we're able to kind of like build off of and be proud of and call an industry, and there's any topic, any discussion on a topic just snowballs into a million directions. But I think there's I think there's more potential than there is problems. That's a thing, and so like I just think, to me, I think there needs to be more weight pulled by entities that are not hard good companies, that are not frame brands and clothing brands that are in the sport. Like those guys have been floating the industry for a long time and are going to be in it. But at the same time, I think we need more than just them to have something that's healthy, that's growing, and you need like the Our BMXs and the digs. And, it's like, it's funny. It's like, since doing all this, I've been seeing like, there's a lot of people that are like starting to do their own thing, like you have your channel that's growing a lot. And then like, there's that Project Spoke that's coming up that's been, generating a lot of stuff. And then talking to Justin, Benthian, he's doing his thing with deliverables. It seems like there's a lot of people that are thinking about a lot of the same things. Oh, and Scott, I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Marceau, he does like the film, he does like those little film festivals and stuff, which I think is huge. I've had that idea and I'm like hyped to see people like organizing movies at like theaters like that, or like videos at like playing, like playlists at venues. I think that's really cool. So
yeah,
it seems like a lot of people have, some motivation to do their thing, which is good to see.
Yeah, so I'll take it back to, you talking about the low numbers thing, not making money now and whatever with that. All of the biggest things that you can think of started with an idea and passion and doing it for free for however long it took until it became sustainable, because the passion is there. And I think you got some awesome ideas, and talking about, the digs and the Our BMX. I'm very critical of those people, but it's because I want to see BMX elevated. And what I'm realizing right now too is that like those are media avenues for people who ride already, people who are deep into BMX, and that's just where they've positioned themselves through doing stuff and maybe not doing stuff like what we're talking about, because what they're doing is catering to people who ride. But what I think this Borough Breaker, games of bike tournaments and things of that nature do is that they bring in not only the core super into it riders who want to see Devin and Garrett play a game of bike against each other, but also the casual people who are just going and having fun at the skate park, who might not be super into a crazy banger video, and then also could bring in people from the YouTube algorithm who don't even ride.
Right.
And that is how you elevate BMX.
Right. And I mean, I think in the past, like X Games or like nowadays, like the Olympics, they expose the sport to a really wide audience, kind of what you were saying, like how it happens through YouTube. But nowadays, like, we need to be able to do things within the industry like that, that are exposing. I mean, it's not like we're doing our own Olympics or our own X Games, but I'm saying like, there needs to be efforts to bring in wider audiences, like how those events can do.
You can't rely on them. You can't rely on the Olympics or the X Games.
It's great that they're involved, but it's like, you don't want to just be reliant on those things. You want to be in control to an extent yourself. And And, you know, you touched like kind of touched on what you were saying before, first on like us not making any money. You know, I have to give credit or just kind of trusting the process too and not
Yeah,
worrying
absolutely.
about so much where the profit comes from. You know, that has been actually the most freeing part of this is like just kind of letting go of that concern quite so much and thinking more about just trying to do cool things and being hyped on our productivity just with, you know, the content and the people that we're able to collaborate and work with. And so, you know, and that has been really great. But I have to give credit, like, you know, it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that, you know,
Hmm.
and a certain type of setup. And like, so like, I'm really lucky to have been able to pair up with Demarcus. We've worked together like since back in the volume days, like when he got on volume and stuff. So we've worked together for like a long time. We've done like ride articles together. And so we have like a really good chemistry working together. And he and I can both sort of like are comfortable letting go of the unknowns and knowing, and we are able to work together enough that we're able to trust our ideas and like the synergy and all that. And so then it's like, okay, like I could never do this with someone that was like, you know, stressing where next month's
Yeah.
money was going to come from. I mean, that's a huge thing. You need to do those things. And I do, you know, I need to think about next month's bills too, but it's like it, the fact that he's willing to, you know, be there and toss ideas around and make them happen and focus on the process and the product and not worry so much about the profit right away is like a huge freedom and it kind of a huge luxury and actually just kind of what makes it all work. You know what I mean? So like it's in I can't put into words like how valuable it is to have, you know, somebody like that to be able to kind of work with and bounce ideas off of and just kind of, you know, sift, like just kind of find your way with,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just like you're like, oh, what do you think? I mean, we're texting today. I'll text him all sorts of stuff like, hey, do you think I should do it this way or that way? Like what feels right? You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
he'll come back to me and be, oh, we should do it like this. And like even if it's not the might be the most catchy thing, like let's do it this way because we're the most hyped on this, you know? And you're like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And so like having his support and confirmation on things and or like I will come up with something that I think is cool, but I'm like, I don't know, let me check and I'll send it with him and he can give me honest feedback. It's like that type of stuff is everything, you know, and it does feel like it is working into something that like, you know, even this conversation now, I'm like, damn, we need to get a site and we need to start putting videos on there and
Yeah.
like start contacting like old, you know, filmers from different eras and start putting those seeds out there, you know, and that's like one thing. And two, you know, like Demarcus and I, we've had the conversation too, where it's like, man, like we need to make sure that we don't overthink things and miss out on the fact that we live in San Diego and that people do come through and we
Yeah.
do have a very special access to a lot of guys where it's like, hey, we hear so and so's in town, like don't be too cool, let's hit them up and say like, hey, let's go ride something and try to film something and try to just put something together last minute and be that place that, you know, has that special access, you know.
Yes,
So
exactly. Is exactly what I was
right
talking
place, right
about
time.
earlier.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so
It's
it's like we don't want to be too cool or just not even too cool, but just too focused on other things to miss out on those opportunities,
you're
you know.
just being you're being mindful of the fact that those opportunities are there to take advantage of them.
Sure.
And if you don't have those thoughts, then that just couldn't happen. So it's good that you're
Right.
just having the forethought to make that happen. And there's so much potential with those things. And it definitely is awesome that it sounds like you have someone partnering up with Demarcus that is like just as much of a we're just gonna do it kind of
Right.
a person, because if there's one thing I've learned about what I do and just doing anything in general through that is that you can't wait on anybody else.
No.
Because the second you start waiting on other people is the second that things just fall apart and don't happen.
Yeah, you wait your whole life, spend your whole life waiting.
Yeah, so it's good, and it's rare to find someone else to work with who is also a just do it kind of person, so that
Yeah.
you bounce that off of each other. And
I mean, I think, and part of that is kind of grown over time. You know what I mean? Where like we've done a lot of projects with each other where we were like super happy with the outcome.
yeah,
And so now it's like he's come to me with ideas, I've come to him with ideas, and we've both sort of been in the passenger seat, with the other person driving it or whatever, and it's gone really well. And so it's like, okay, now we're both fully comfortable working with each other in whatever capacity, and he has a lot more experience on the rider side too, like, I mean, I ride and I, came from riding, but at the same time, not to the degree that he has. And so like he, a lot of times will bring another, a lot of times I'll be focused on some, a lot more like the production side of something and the nuts and bolts of something. And he is more, and he will be thoughtful of, say like the people who are involved.
yeah,
When he was one of the athletes in the game of bike, like on Dennis's channel. And so like he definitely had a lot of input and insight into things like, hey, you got to make sure that these things are balanced, because the riders want to feel like it's a level playing field, like one, this isn't even really getting into it, but like one of the things that he brought up was like when we first started doing those games of bikes, like we were kind of loose with the rules, like,
yeah,
and it wasn't really on purpose. We just really didn't think of all the little nuances or all the little possibilities that could come out of a game like that.
yeah,
And so once we kind of got into it, he was one of the people that brought it up, like, hey, like you got to make sure that like we have everything really outlined and like specified so that we know what to fall back on. And there's no questioning how this works, because if you question the outcome, then the whole thing is, you can't follow along with it. If you can't really feel like it's a fair game, or it's like a thought out game, or the rules aren't consistent and they make sense, and so
yep.
on
that
he
note,
brings that really good. Yeah.
just go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just gonna say he just brings a really good perspective on that stuff that, like a lot of times I'll miss.
So talking about the rules and stuff from that game of bike, Pond Fest in Colorado was right after you guys wrapped up, and Bill was there, the ref.
Oh my God, the ref.
So I was talking to him there, and I don't know if he'd want me to talk about this, but I don't really care. He was stressing about how hard people were being on him in the comments. And, and he was really feeling it. And I looked at him and I'm like, dude, lean into that. Because that is going to be what makes people want to watch and keeps people invested. Like, lean into that. I know it sucks. Just don't read those comments, because you did a good job. You did your job. You did fantastic. And you, by being yourself, became a character. And it was part of this thing that made it what it was. You got to lean into that, because it's going to make it that much more unique and special.
Sure. No, for sure. I mean, Bill was the unsung hero of that whole series, for sure, because it was an afterthought. Like oh man, that's a perfect example of like, you just don't know how things are going to play out. And Dennis had mentioned like, oh, I talked to Bill and I'm going to have him show up in a ref outfit with and I was like, I just thought that's the corniest idea, dude. But again, I was like, hey man, this is your channel, your thing. Like, all right, yeah, that just seems weird. But like, if you want to do it, let's do it. And in hindsight, it was gold.
Yeah.
And oh man, and he took the brunt too, because like there was really nothing in it for him. He was just down to just be a friend who was going to be there. And we discussed nothing with him ahead of time. Like, really though, like it was like we had no rules. We didn't think, like, we had very little. I can't even remember like what the rules were. It was just like, oh, it's going to be alternating. The trick's alternating. And it was like, that's kind of it. Like we had barely anything. And then when there was a dispute, which there was almost immediately a dispute on something, we're like, Bill, what do you want to do? And then he's on camera and he's looking at Dennis like, what do you want me to do?
Deer in headlights.
Yeah, because we never like he didn't know that we were gonna default to him,
Yeah.
and it was all just in camera like that. And then it was so funny because then we gave him a set of rules, and then it was like, oh man, that the Devin game with Devin and Garrett when he did the sui bot or the fakey suicide and then hits the pole and corrects out. He's like, that's not what you called. And so like, and he was setting the trick, and we decided through all this, back and forth that like setting the trick has to be very clean.
Yeah.
Matching the trick can be sloppy and can be kind of a gray area, but setting the trick cannot be disputed, and so he was trying to oh, it was just so great because everybody, even Dennis, was like, he pulled it
Yeah.
perfect, and he's like, nah, he didn't. And then it was like, oh, now what do we do, and then it was like, and thank God we like defaulted just giving him a second chance, and thank God he just pulled it, and it was like it didn't change the trajectory of the game.
Yeah.
But it just was like, yeah, he was the unsung hero for sure.
It was great.
He took a lot of hits that we weren't anticipating, and he ended up being a bit of a punching bag. But he was great. I think him squirming was part of the appeal too, though.
Well,
It's like
probably.
him not liking it and him actually being uncomfortable with the whole thing was
But
like why
still doing it. Yeah.
Oh, he loves Dennis. I think he would show up for Dennis, and it was, and I think he was stoked to be a part of it. But yeah, those games were gnarly, and I mean, it snowballed into something we had no idea that it was going to, and but it just, it goes to show the energy that there is for that kind of content.
Yeah,
like people really do want to see it, and a lot of times it's funny. A lot of these riders, these high level pro riders, they've just been on that like high gear for so long that they almost don't know how to back it off, or like, oh, what, like I can just show a little bit more of my personality and like get the same, it's not like it's an easier route, but it's just like there's more to it than just the banger edits, you know what I mean? And so there's more for them to get out of riding and get out of being a pro than just having to risk themselves to that degree every time they go out.
Yes, and honestly, you saying that is the best transition back to the team manager conversation side of things, because I was just thinking about wanting to go back to talking about that stuff. And I think part of it too is that the expectations from these riders are so ambiguous when it comes to what they're actually supposed to do. That like that is what it's morphed into, is that, well, these banger edits are what everybody seemingly wants to see, and it's what the companies want from the riders. So that is just what people do. And what I would love to have a conversation with you about, as someone who has sat in that role of being the person who's like communicating with the riders what they need to do, like, and also connected with the companies, like, I want to try and give people a little bit of a roadmap for them, if they listen to this, to be like, oh, okay, that's the kind of stuff that I should be doing. Because so many people who have never been connected with a company, never been sponsored or anything, think that it's just, well, now I'm sponsored, I get free stuff, that's the end of it. But the reality is there's way more to it, and you have to return on that sponsorship investment. So like, as the TM, what kind of things are you wanting to see from a rider, wanting them to do?
Well, so I mean, I've only been TM for like either bike brands or a core parts brand.
Yeah.
So I've not managed a program that was more corporate or that didn't sell bike parts.
Yeah.
To some degree. So I will say first, because we talked a bit about this on the Unclicked podcast, and I kind of talked about one side of it.
So go watch that.
Which was a core. Yeah, sorry, but yeah, no. Well, I'll kind of. So the thing is like, the first thing you want to do when it comes to like, oh, what should you be doing as a rider if you have a sponsor, is like knowing your sponsor, right? So if it's a bike company, and they sell bike parts or bike, BMX related clothes or whatever, they're probably going to be, more focused on moving product, promoting those products, using you to ride those products and showcase those, but another sponsor, like what I didn't talk about on that Unclick podcast, is like, you might have a sponsor that is more on the corporate side, and they're not looking for you to sell specific products so much as they're looking for you to just reach a certain audience. Like they're wanting you to reach a certain demographic with your style content while you're endorsing their brand. And so it's really more of like a brand recognition and like just sort of just implanting the brand in a certain areas. It's like what they will lean on their riders for. So like knowing that is huge, like obviously, like if you're riding for a brand that's selling frames or parts, like their money is coming from selling parts. So whatever your efforts are, whatever those are, if it's banger edits or if it's shop stops or if it's vlogs on your YouTube, like, and linking to their to their stores, it's like you should be doing your part to help them sell products is really what it comes down to. I mean, like, and it's not like you need to be assisting them in selling products, but it's like, and so, but ultimately it's like you're trying to elevate their brand, or like they're hoping that through sponsoring you, the people that are watching you, it'll help elevate their brand or make their brand resonate in your brain more than the competition. And
So
you're gonna buy the product because you like the riders who ride for them or whatever.
So essentially, too, like something people could actually be doing is rather than just riding the thing, you make posts about the thing, you talk about the thing, like what if it's a
Yeah,
frame,
all of
whatever it
that.
might be. Don't
All
take
of
all
the
the
above.
stickers off of it so people can tell what it is.
Right. If you're going to take the stickers off, like reapply new stickers in a way. But generally speaking, we want you, like as a team manager, I would want you to keep everything as close to stock as you could with with the stickers so that it looks like the products that are available. Ultimately, what it really comes down to, the bottom line is just communication. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a core sponsor, if it's a corporate sponsor, communicating with them and knowing what they expect from you. A lot of problems come out of the fact that sponsorships will exist with no contracts.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies there's some like weird taboo that like somehow contract means like there's a lack of trust or something like that. Or some companies might look at a contract like this is a commitment that I don't know if I could really
Yeah.
hold up to. But the benefit of a contract, a properly done contract, is that it lists out what they want from you.
Yeah.
Like it spells it out in black and white in the contract. And each sponsor is different. Like, I remember at a time, like I can't speak super specific, but like, Red Bull, they focused on projects and events and getting their riders in the mix on different things, where like Rockstar wanted their athletes going to TV events and being on TV, and they weren't doing anything in-house. They were like sending like putting money into getting their guys to getting to pre-existing events.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a different focus, so like if you're a Red Bull guy, then a Red Bull rider, then yeah, you want to get more in the mix with what they're doing. If you're a Rockstar person, then it's like you probably want to go to more events. It's like, and those, they will specify, well, they should be specifying in a contract what they're delivering to you, and in return what you're delivering to them. And that way there's no question. And like a lot of times, if I was bringing on a new rider or had to talk to a rider about an issue with like their performance or what they were delivering or whatever, I would use the contract as our starting point. This was our agreement that we laid out, because of these things, now is that changing? Why? Or like, what's the problem? Or like, it's just communicating that stuff out. And I mean, if you're just not doing it, it's like, hey, you're not doing it, so we
Right.
can't honor the contract, and like, and it's funny because like I'll explain it to some riders, because like sometimes riders will like not understand why a company is frustrated. And sometimes, I mean, and it used to be different. It used to be different. Like it used to be, it's always changing. And that's why the communication is key.
Yeah.
Because nowadays the focus is on social media. So like if you're a sponsored rider and you're on contract, there's probably a strong chance that it's going to list out how many social posts they would like a month. And if they would like one to be exclusive to them, with no other sponsors tagged, and what that all looks like. Is it video? Is it photo? And do they want you? It's just, they will lay it out. And I guess that's what I was getting to. And so it's like, it shouldn't be really a question. What I was saying to, what I would say to riders, that's what I was getting at, is if you're not honoring all those pieces of your contract, you should look at it the same as like, well, what if the company just decided to send you 50% of your agreed upon check?
Yeah.
It's like, you would be pissed about that. You would say, hey, what's going on? Well, it's like, hey, you didn't do 2 of the 4 posts that you agreed to do. Oh, well, I got hurt. Or like, oh, the weather's bad. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you agreed to do these things. You know what I mean? And it's like, so that's why like riders who are seasoned or like know that whole world, they'll stack clips.
Yeah.
Or they save things, or they will just repost stuff, or the other thing is too, is like a lot of riders think, oh, I'm hurt, I'm just going to sit at home and do nothing. And it's like, no, if you can walk, or if you can move around to some degree, you could reach out to your sponsors and say, is there anything I can help out to promote? Because you still have an audience. Like, your value as a rider nowadays is like the people who follow you, the people who like your riding, the people who admire what you do and watch what you're doing.
Yeah, I equate this.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of like TV coverage or magazine coverage that brings their audience for riders to be on,
Right.
which used to be a focus for sponsors. But nowadays it's a lot about, your own presence and like the audience you've built.
Right. I equate a lot of like talking about the expectations and things, and if people don't understand or when they don't understand, to talking about like a real job. If you go to work, you have set things that your boss tells you or you just know are part of your job that you have to do. If you don't do those things, you're going to get fired. There's no company that's going to just be like, oh, I only paid you half because you only did half. It's like, no, you're just gone, because we're going to find somebody else. Obviously, BMX works differently than that, but it's similar.
It's not much though. I mean, like when it comes to sponsorship, it's like there's usually not a lot of questions. Like it either works good or it works bad. And if it doesn't work right, there's no real wondering why.
Yeah.
It's either, a lot of times it'll boil down to like maybe really poor communication on the company side or the rider side, and just a breakdown of communication and a misunderstanding. And eventually it just falls out. Oh God, I lost my train of thought. Or the other side is, what was I gonna say? Or like sometimes the riders, it's as simple as like they might have like an authority complex and they just don't want to do what they're told to do.
Well, that's BMX at its core,
that's what
right?
I mean. They think it's BMX to ignore it. You know what I mean? And like that's just it. And it's like so like sometimes it's really bad communication on the side of the brand, and other times it's just simple like you just don't want to listen and you just want to do your own thing. But if that is the type of rider you are, that is fair. Like there are riders that are just genuinely not good sponsorable riders, amazing talents, but like wild hearts that maybe just aren't really built to be a sponsored guy. They're not built for the business side. You know what I mean? They're more for like the purest art soul side. And it's like,
which is great.
That's fair. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's usually the main 2 ways sponsors will go bad, is if someone stops listening or if there's just poor communication on either or both sides, you know, or if the company just stops making money and then they just don't have money to pay the guys. Those are pretty much the ways a sponsorship will go bad, you know.
Yeah. I would love if we could, and if you're willing to go through and we can make a literal roadmap where we say, all right, go from people who are not connected or sponsored in any way, and flow guys, am guys, pro guys. Like what is the person who's not sponsored in any way but is trying to be do to try to get to that flow? Like what things should they be doing to prove themselves as a valuable asset to a company, because it's not just riding.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of I mean, it's probably more than two things, but the main thing is, you know, like developing your own style, you know, like showing that you are just, you're growing as a rider, and that you're staying active as a rider. And then also that and then also that you get involved in the scene, that you're in the mix. That's how you build it. And getting involved means you're going to events, but you're also like building relationships, and you're trying to, you know, work with people on projects. You know, don't be too cool, but also don't be annoying about it, but just say like, hey, I really like, you know, it's funny. It's like people get taken back if you go, hey, I really like your stuff, what you do. It'd be really cool to be part of it one day. Like, I'm going to follow you, and then I'll just stay in touch. And it's like, yeah, right in that moment, it's probably not going to lead to anything, but I guarantee you that person who you spoke with will remember that interaction. And then if you pop up in their messages, like, oh, hey, like 3 months later, hey, I, you know, saw you at that one thing. Just want to say hi, you know, like there's a good chance if they click on your page, or what also might happen is like, say you're popping off doing something else, or you're at a different event and you got a really cool clip and it happened to get posted on a highlight reel or something. And then the person sees it and they're like, oh, that's that kid I talked to in that lobby 6 months ago. Damn, he's sick, you know? And it was like, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was that guy that we saw like that 3 years ago. And like, look, dude, they're so good now. And it's like, you see people building up. And then it's just, the other really hard part is trying to not put too much pressure on any one thing happening a certain way.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, you know, the timing is everything too. You can be the perfect fit for Vans, but if they're not in a position to add riders and they're not looking to add riders, you're not getting on Vans.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, don't get so hung up on one route, because the timing has to be right. Just because Vans isn't adding any riders and is unwilling to go over budget to put you on the team doesn't mean that you're not, you know, a valuable thing, or that what you're doing isn't working. You know, I've seen plenty of people that like move to California, do this big push, build up some momentum and get some notoriety going, but then they're not ultimately able to like hang in there long enough to like wait for something to happen.
Yeah.
Like they're putting too much pressure on, like, I got 6 months to make it, and if it doesn't happen, I'm going to go belly up and I'm going to be salty guy, you know, going back home. But it's like, damn, if you were able to come up with some other thing where like you were able to just live your life.
Yeah.
And then if it happens, it happens. It will happen. It might not be with Vans. If, you know, it might be with another thing that like the point is like, if you're staying out there and you're in the mix and you're going to events or you're doing projects with people, and that whole time your style is growing and you're meeting people and you're talking to people, there will be an instance that comes up where they're like, people are going to be looking for riders, thinking about something. I just did this thing, Borough Breakers, you know, I'm thinking about 10 riders, like who would be 10 guys, you know? And it's like, I didn't know about Matt Miller, really. I didn't know about Harrison, really, you know? I didn't even really know about Joe Jarvis. I mean, I knew these guys, but I didn't know about them that much. But then it's like, then it's like, oh, but now you're digging into doing something. And now you're actually looking at the names that are out there and active. And you're like, Ooh, perfect fit.
So you're
Perfect
planting
fit.
the seeds to get to lead to those moments, basically.
Totally. You never know like when something is going to take shape and there is going to be a program taking like coming out of something.
Yeah.
And then, they are looking for young riders. Oh, a perfect example is that kid. Is his name Ari? Is it like S&M rider or what's his name? So
Oh
with an
yeah,
A.
REA.
REA. Like I don't know REA, but he's sick.
Yeah.
He's sick. I saw him do it was like a ramp clip he did. He did like a hand plant on vert wall to fakie.
Yeah.
And it was like he's a perfect example. Like if he keeps going where he's going and he's able to just kind of like do his thing at like the pace he's doing it, and he doesn't need something to happen, it will happen. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure it's already happening
Yeah,
for
he's
him, but
pro
I'm
on
just saying,
S&M.
no, I know he's pro on S&M, but I'm saying like it could keep building. I mean,
Right.
like, you know what I mean? Like he could really like, and he's a young rider is kind of what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like he's somebody who like I don't know where he's from, but like I don't know that he's like the child of a pro rider. You know what I
No,
mean? Like I
definitely
think
not.
he's making his name for himself. And that only happened because he stayed active. He's going to those things, he's filming, he's having fun.
Yeah.
And then he's pairing up with brands now, and now he's going on trips, and you're just going to see more and more and more. And now it's like, and then all of a sudden he's a household name. And I think that's the special formula. No matter where you're from, you like I mean, yeah, no matter where you're from, like you can make a name for yourself. Obviously some places are harder than others. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just location is a huge part of it. It's not like it's a proven formula regardless of where you're from,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing.
so let's move. All right, let's assume that this person you're talking about listened to your advice and now they're on the flow team for a company. What types of things should they be doing for that company in order to try to move on to the AM side? And then how do they know when they should be asking or trying to actually move up instead of just staying in that position forever?
Okay, yeah, that's good stuff too. Okay. And the higher up you get into this, the harder the realities can become,
Yeah.
is what I would say. I have like certain names that come to mind that deserved paid positions. There just wasn't one.
Yeah.
And you can't fire the people who already have the paid positions to make room for that new guy.
Right.
So that's really tough. And that's just the reality, is that sometimes there's only so many. And I think now almost more than ever, there's like riders that are really existing that have no frame sponsors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Demarcus, he didn't have a frame sponsor, but he's able to do it, and he's got a lot going on. And I'm sure there's only so many slots. I'm sure there's a lot of companies that would be down to have Demarcus be on their team, but it's like there's only so much room that you can have for riders.
So understand that, anyone who's
understand
watching
that side of it. Yeah. So I was getting back to what the original question was. So say you're getting flow from a team, then at that point, it's just a matter of like being open to just trying to find ways to find your place at the table, whatever that is. Every program is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. So I can't say exactly what you do, but be proactive. Ask them, what can I do, or what could help promote? And then also just see what other people are doing that you think is interesting, that might, speak to your style or whatever, that you might be able to bring to the table that other riders aren't doing. Oh, I follow all kinds of different industries, people that are like specialized in their industry. So like I'll see all kinds of stuff from like the golf industry, or like the auto industry, or like the camera equipment industry, that you're like, ooh, this would make a sick promo for Haro at the time, or whatever, And so like, if you're a rider, I'm looking at athletes. If I'm a rider and I'm a young guy and I'm trying to come up, and I'm like, I have content that I film, or like me and my homies do stuff. It's like, I'm looking at what some riders are doing, trying to see like, oh, what looks unique or what looks interesting to me, like different ways I can promote sponsors. And, or, just if you have an idea for your own projects, that you can then promote your sponsors through. Thank you to my sponsors for helping me make this project happen. You made your own project. You did your own thing that got legs and got notoriety. And now it's like you're sort of making your own value
Yes.
at a company that you already have your foot in the door in. So and then like the best thing you could do basically is like sort of surprise them by being like, oh, damn, like, okay, yeah, so this is a great thing. Like people want their lives to be easier, not to be harder. So like make their life easier. Like if you're an athlete and you can have access to product and you can promote it, and you could promote it kind of half-ass and just take a picture, whatever. Or you could think like, ooh, how could I do something different or unique or interesting, or like something that might have my own flavor on it. And that can get the attention of the people at your sponsor and be like, wow, like we're not even paying them and they're doing the sickest stuff, which often happens, but not everybody does that. And those are the people that will rise, is because you'll say like, oh, Brant is doing these awesome promos. We haven't even asked him to. We should give him some budget and tell him to go do the next thing, because you want someone that's going to have that initiative to do cool things that you don't have to like beg and plead or look over their shoulder the whole time to do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And keep in mind, people, that everything from the level below that we keep talking about gets carried on to the next one. So everything you said about not people who aren't connected yet gets applied to the flow guy, and everything you're saying about the flow guy and the other gets applied to the AM guy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so, well, and like the benefit with BMX is like, you can't really keep something in the shadows that is doing good, or like that is something that people are responding to.
Unless you really screwed somebody and the wrong person over.
Unless you're a dick. Unless people don't like you. And that's a big part of it, is you have to be personable. Like I think BMX, I mean, at certain points there's certain areas of BMX where it is very competitive and you can be kind of like a cutthroat competitor.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes against the grain of like what BMX is, and I think it is overall like more collaborative and more of a group thing. That's when it's at its best, I think, is when it's like a group thing. And so the cooler you can be in that way. You don't want to be fake, but you want to be fun and easy to work with and open to things and try to toss your own ideas out there. And I've always been somebody that got more traction by bringing something new to the table, rather than doing something existing the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just my approach. That's how I know myself. When I'm saying do things that relate to you or do things that resonate with you, that's what I mean, is like, I'm usually not the person to finish first or to learn the thing the fastest. I'm the person that kind of takes a longer time to get something, but I can think of it from a different angle and usually bring something unique to the table that will get me that recognition and will earn me a seat at the table.
And realize that you cannot fake it for long enough to make it, because putting on that face and doing the opposite of what you just said and not being yourself to try and get to somewhere, you can't do that for as long as it takes to make things happen. It comes out eventually. So you have to find your path in what you're saying.
Well, and too, I mean, there's been people who were like pretty successful in BMX, but had like a pretty bad attitude. And then it was an overall bumpy road for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, and too, there was like no love lost, like when, they may have faded or something like that. Then like nobody's trying to get them back in, because it's like, yo, you were just a pain in the ass to work with. Like, but you were the best, but you're a dick, and that's that. Yeah, it just makes life hard for people like that, and like, I think there's actually that kind of, it's funny because I said being a dick, sometimes there has been a thing I've seen with like the more like the Olympic side of athletes, definitely more on the race side than freestyle. But now with the Olympics, it's happening on the freestyle, where there has been riders that are so focused and so committed to their riding that they don't really participate on the social side. And then when they get to this huge level of athlete, they wonder why nobody supports them and nobody backs them. And it's like, well, you've been a part of no scenes and nobody really like knows you or relates to you, and nobody. And so then it's like, and you've not gone on any trips or like anything like that. And so then it's like, you don't really have that same level of support because you were so dedicated and so like tunnel visioned on training.
Yeah, you shut everything else out. Yeah.
Right. And BMX is a social thing.
Yeah.
And like what you're saying before about like people want to relate to the human side of it. And the machine side is like, you know, the crazy tail whip triple or like, you know, flip combinations. Like that's almost like the least relatable side.
Right.
You know?
So to go back now, we've talked about flow. Are there anything, I think everything we've said applies to AM and Pro as well.
Yeah,
is there anything now that you move from flow to AM that is expected over the flow side of things?
No, I mean, I think you're more involved in projects. Like flow is like pretty informal and like, you know, not, you're really just kind of like wanting, if I'm flowing somebody product, I'm really just trying to help facilitate their riding, their progression.
Yeah.
And I'm not really too dependent on them to market the brand or anything like that. Like there's very low pressure, low expectation on them. Really, the only expectation I have on like a flow rider is to keep riding and to keep being visible. Like I know you're there. You didn't
keep doing what you did to get to this point, basically.
And we want to see, hopefully in a year or two, then you are at that AM level, which would be, you know, maybe inviting you into projects or on trips, or you might be involved in like smaller paid shoots or like something where it's like a paid element to it. And that's just then, you know, the next level up from that, you know, you just then have to be a little bit more aware of, you know, how you act or like, you know, how you treat people and your reputation, you know, because if you're a dick, then people don't really want to support you and they're not really hyped on who you ride for. On the alternate side of that, if you're a good dude and you're like, people really like you, then it's a huge benefit. Like the person I think about that jumps to mind the most is like when I managed Demolition. Now it's like 10 years ago. By the time like Connor Lotus, you know, he's still one of my good friends. But when he was on the team that I managed, like he was a great person to have on the team because he was like the friendliest guy. Like everybody loved him. And he, like, you go to a skate park, he would introduce himself to all the locals and all the young guys. And it was just like, he's a very personable guy and everybody likes him, you know? And so you knew that like when Connor would be a part of a project, you were going to have somebody that was going to help like lift the vibe and like, you know, help give people a good impression of what we are doing, you know? And so that's a huge part of it.
That makes perfect sense. I think that seems like it would cover the AM side really, really well at that point. And just continuing with everything else we talked about. And I think the most important aspect of all of it is being proactive. And if you're asking what you can do before they can ask you to do it, you're going to put yourself in a position to, one, be more involved with more things, and two, be more involved with more things. You're going to be more involved with the company at that point.
Totally. Well, and I think, you know, proactive in two ways, you know, proactive with asking them, you know, communicating with them what you can do or how you can help be an asset. But then two, being proactive in your own pursuits. Like, I think that's a huge thing in BMX. It's a huge positive that like BMX is like a small world, so that like if you are doing things that get attention, like they get attention, you know? And so like, and I'm a big proponent of not waiting around even for a sponsor's project to come, you know, knocking on your door. It's like, no, like, yeah, wait, you want that project to come and I'm looking forward to that project to come. But while I'm waiting, let me, you know, get some other ideas going. So I'm not just waiting for that.
Yeah.
I have my own thing. and I mean, like, lean into whatever your thing is. Like, and if you're from a region or an area that is less popular with BMX, well, still lean into that. Like, that is your thing, or like if you get notoriety, like, that's part of your identity, and so it's like you can play that up and use it as a strength, not a weakness. It's a unique side of it. It's not a bad side of it. And that will help. I mean, yeah. So it's like, if I think in general, if you're proactive and you look at it like from a positive perspective, like, yeah, if you're from a small town or whatever, you could be negative about that, but you can also be like, okay, well, what's unique about that? And then just lean into that and play it up. And like, you know, a perfect example is like Seth Kimbrough. Like when I was a kid, like he was from like Alabama, and like Alabama was like, yeah, I think he's from Alabama, and like that's a pretty small scene. Like,
Mhm.
and I think he had like church ramps was like where he rode. It was like a church skate park, and like, but like he was able to, like develop his style and also film. Like his whole props interview, I think, was like in Alabama, like random Alabama spots, like
Wow.
maybe in Mobile or something. And it was just like, but it was cool. Like he had the way he wrote it and it was sick. And he was like the first guy. I want to say he was probably the first guy to do like nollie bars and stuff like off stairs.
Hmm.
And like, and he just, and then if he rode ramps and stuff, he had like a really cool like street approach to riding ramps. And like, and that was a huge part of his identity, I think, when he first came out, was like the fact that he was from this small town, and he was an unbelievable rider, like street rider and ramp rider, and
Yeah.
so I think that's what's cool about BMX is BMX responds to that stuff. We always are looking for new things and like fresh perspectives and like all of that. Yeah.
So now we get to the paid position. You are a paid pro rider. What should you know and be doing at this point to help out and earn that paycheck?
I mean, the biggest thing is just, is the communication and just making sure whatever they're expecting from you, you understand that and you're delivering.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's pretty much it. Like, I think, and then again, just being proactive in doing your own thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and I I loved it when riders were involved in different projects. A lot of times that meant different sponsors, but it doesn't always mean that. Just if it was great as a sponsor, if you see your riders involved in other projects that you have nothing to do with, but they're active, and you can repost it on your story, or you could just comment, "This is sick," and they're out there on Haro.
Yeah.
Like Matthias was like one of the most active guys ever, and he's just getting that bike in front of so many people in so many parts of the world.
Mm.
Like that's a huge thing. And yeah, and so like as a contract or as a paid guy, you should have your terms laid out in the contract, and then it's just making sure those terms are met, and then just growing yourself as a rider and making sure that you don't get stagnant and that you're staying fresh. And but I think that's the job of a rider. You know what I mean? A job of an athlete is to stay fresh and to be aware of that stuff and not get stale or stuck into anything, too strictly,
Yeah.
and it's just the communication is huge, and not being too cool. You know what I mean? Like not being above anything. So like being responsive to stuff. That was like one big thing. Like with the Haro team is like we had like you could say like arguably the best athletes in like the main different segments, like street, we had
Yeah.
Chad and Dennis, but like ramp, we had Dennis, and then like flatland, we had Matthias, and we had Nyquist too on the ramp side. I mean, like
Yeah.
DMC, I mean, like, these legendary guys, but they were always down. And Paris too. I mean, Paris, obviously. And so
Yeah.
they were always down to participate. Like if you called them, they got back to you. If
Mhm.
you texted them, they got back to you. If they, a lot of them had tough schedules, so they might not be able to participate for that reason. But that's like where my job comes in, just balancing all that. But if you're accessible, that's what's important. If you're a paid person, don't go on vacation and fall off and be hard to reach and be moody and be closed off to ideas. That would be the quickest recipe to get kicked off, in my opinion.
Yeah. One thing
I
I
just
would
put on a team again.
That'd be understandable too.
Yeah.
One thing I would add to this too, that I think a lot of people, I don't know if people just don't think about it or try and it doesn't work out or was like, if you have ideas for parts or how things could be made better or changed or anything like that, communicating those ideas is how new parts and things end up showing up. Because yeah, like a product designer's job is to be making stuff, but it's also the rider's job to communicate what riders need to be able to do it.
Yeah, totally. And actually, that is a huge part of the value of a rider that isn't usually, I mean, sometimes it is ironed out in a contract, or it's kind of spelled out a little bit in a contract, like to assist with product development.
It's hard to
But
measure.
that's very hard to measure. And you could be a very big asset with your product testing. And like when I would give riders sample product to ride, I wouldn't just say like, hey, see if you can break this or see if it breaks or whatever, or see how it feels. I would say, no, as soon as you get it, like think about it as if you bought it.
Yeah.
And how does it go on the bike? Is it easy to work on? Does it install easy? Does it adjust easy? If you have to take it apart, how is that? Does it pack easy in your bag? Like what problems came out, you know? And so like the more you can communicate that stuff, the more valuable you are as a rider.
Don't just say this is the best thing ever when you get something, because that does not help anyone.
Right. And being honest. And there's a time and the place, you know, like if you're on camera at Interbike or whatever the, you know, whatever the trade shows are, you know, you hope they say that more or less, you know what I mean? But if you're in a meeting and you're sitting down with the riders and you're trying to get input on product development, then yeah, you want them to be honest and thought out. A lot of times riders will be like in a different place, or they're just not thinking about where they are, you know, and that's the thing, is just being engaged and being involved. It's once you get to be a paid rider, I mean, the tricky part is you'll be surprised how many brands don't put their riders on contract. And then it is ambiguous. Then it is difficult to know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That to me is a big problem. And I've heard of even prominent brands, probably every big brand you could name, I've heard of headaches that have come between riders and that brand because they didn't have them on contract. They could be paid riders with signature product and not on contract, which to me is insane. But I think like some people just think that it's like a negative thing or a corporate or a big business thing to try to put their rider on contract. But to me, it just spells it out. It just lays it all out. What each side is getting and what each side is supposed to put out there, you know?
Yeah. And it sounds like we go back to talking about from AM to pro, a part of that should be, all right, if they don't bring up contract, you bring it up and make it a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it's only taboo or weird if you let it be. And then it's like, if you can communicate as adults, then it's just like, look, it's in both of our interests to know what to expect. That way we can keep this going and we can build on it.
Yeah.
Just had a train of thought. Oh, what was it? Oh yeah. Another thing that I think about actually that is important as a paid rider, if you do get to that level, and this is not easy, it's not easy to sell BMX parts. It's not easy to sell BMX parts. And so, and I think people would be surprised at the actual numbers that we're talking about. There's actually, I'm snowballing into something. There's a trap that riders fall into a lot of times. It's something that happens where, and it's not their fault. It's just a weird tendency that happens where people will say, oh man, Brent, if you had a signature S&M, I would buy that shit. And I would buy it all the time. I would. And you will hear that from 1,000 people. And then you would tell Moeller, hey dude, 1,000 people have told me they'd buy a frame. And then Moorer might listen and get you a frame, and then no one buys it.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened to those 1,000 people? When the product is actually not purchasable, they will say they will buy it.
Yeah.
To hype you up, and they're supporting you. I'm not saying they're lying, but it's just a funny phenomenon that happens, that riders sometimes they think companies aren't they're not giving me a chance because I have people up and down, left and right telling me they will buy my stuff, and they won't they won't market it, or they won't develop it. And it's like, bike companies, for sure, one thing is for sure, if they really could sell 1,000 frames, they would do it. They would absolutely do it. If
Yeah.
you genuinely, any single person had the ability to, Jake Paul, dude, if he had the ability to put his name on a signature high-end BMX frame, and that meant 1,000 units were going to sell of that frame, I guarantee you bike companies would give him a signature frame. But that is actually a very hard thing to do that I think riders underestimate a lot. Like at Haro, I mean, I'll be honest, and it's not a problem. I won't say names or anything, but like, we would struggle with units of like 50.
Yeah.
50. We order 50 of something, and it might take 2 years to sell it. 50 units.
Yeah.
You could go and say, oh, accumulatively, our riders, these 4 riders have 750,000 followers on Instagram. We should be able to sell 50 stems. And then it's like, no, you don't. You sell maybe 10 in that first month, and then they just trickle out for the next 24 months.
Yeah.
That's a really hard reality. And that's a hard thing that bike brands are tackling. And so I think if you're a rider, again, it's not an easy situation. It's not an easy solution. It's not like it's something, but if you are thinking along those lines, you just know that it's not easy to do what those brands are doing. And if you are able to in some way help push product, and it actually makes a dent and moves, that's huge. That's the name of the game. That's the thing. Like, and so it's not like you as a rider need to be a salesperson, or that should be all that you're thinking about. It's not, but to just have that somewhere in your frame of mind, I think is healthy.
Yeah.
And here's a good point. So like on that, I don't want to keep referencing the Unclicked podcast, but I did bring something up. I'll bring up here. It sounds controversial, but I think it's true. And I almost think I'm still underdoing this. So if you're a rider and you're trying to get on like a core brand, or like a, frame company, you should think about, if you're going to really pay for your place on that company, like say you want $1,000 a month, you should be thinking that you need to be bringing in 10 times that amount into that company to pay for your place.
Yeah.
So if you want $1,000 a month, that means, you should be bringing in roughly $120,000 of sales to that company per year to pay for your place. Yeah. People go, what? That's nuts. Like you're nuts for thinking that or whatever. But the reality is like those. So like, let's just make it around 100,000, right? Say for instance, you bring in $100,000 and you want $10,000 a year. You want $10,000. So the company needs to make $100,000. Companies generally, hard good companies, frame companies, bike companies, they struggle. They want to make 30% on their sale.
Yeah.
So out of that $100,000 of sales, their goal is to keep 30 grand. And out of that 30 grand, you want 10. And so now they have 20 grand, you took 10, and that's what they're meant to keep the entire company afloat on.
Yeah.
And so you have to, of course, you extrapolate that for all the products, but the point is like, you might think, oh, you're making 100 grand. How come you can't pay me 10? It's like, well, no, I'm only making 30 and I'm about to give you a third of it. Yeah. And that's if you're bringing in the 100 grand. If you're not bringing in 10 times the money, then you're probably costing them. They're probably negative. Having you on the team is probably costing them money. And then what sense does that make from a business side? oh, I have this place on this team, but really they pay me $10,000 a year. Maybe I sell 2 or 5 grand worth of product. So I'm costing them, $5,000 and not even considering their margins. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
that is unsustainable. So like that to me means that you have a target on your back, because if somebody comes in and wants to clean house, they go, oh, we're paying this guy 10 grand. I don't think he's bringing in 100 grand. Let's
Yep.
get rid of him. But there are the people that you're like, no, between their reputation or their pull in the sport or their influence and their signature product and the reach that they give us if they get involved in our projects, they're way worth the money. There are some people that we would consider like a slam dunk worth the money
Yeah.
because of how much exposure and how much traction they're able to get. So to say, oh, 10 times, it's like that's just the unfortunate side of the business. It's like
And
I know companies wish they made more than 30% off their sales, but like that's just it. That's what they make.
right. And you also got to consider on top of that, that person isn't just getting money, they're getting parts when they need them,
Totally.
clothes, and all of. So the whole thing that what you just said boils down to is that it all costs money. Everything you get from that company, whether it's direct money or parts or clothes or it's sent somewhere, all of it costs money, and you have to be able to bring more in for them than what they're giving to you.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's essentially, man, I just like, yeah. So that's exactly right. All of that costs money. When we would put our contracts together at Haro, we would put in product support. That was a value. That was a line item.
Yeah.
It was generally, what would it be? It was their salary, video contingency, product support. Sometimes they might have product incentives, so they might get paid, $200 extra to run a certain part.
Mm,
All those, and then and all of those things would add up to your package price, and that's how we would budget for athletes. Was based off of was the overall package that included the cost of your product as well. And so, yeah, right. I mean, that's just the nature of it. If you're going to get into sponsorship, then it's a business thing.
yep.
And now we're looking at it from a business perspective. And don't get mad. Just know that's how it's paid. Like if a company wants to pay a rider $10,000 a year, well, they're going to need to at least bring in, they're going to have to at least bring in $30,000 or whatever, $30 or $40,000 just to actually pay you,
Right.
without going in the hole. And then they're going to need to bring in substantially more to actually benefit from your sponsorship. That's just, I mean, and again, that's more for BMX core brands. I mean, if you're riding for like a random internet drink company or something, they might be looking at you to just get in front of more people who could potentially buy their drinks, but it might not be quite so tangible, your value in those instances.
It's a brand awareness thing.
I think most riders are trying to go for like core brands right off the jump, or, anyways, it's like first sponsors, or like first paying sponsors.
Yeah, man. And I think a great way to wrap up that part of the conversation is if that doesn't apply to you, then don't worry about it because it doesn't apply to you. What do
you mean?
Like, this will help explain it to you. I make these videos sometimes where I'm talking about an aspect of the industry, like the marketing thing or like the shop stop video where I'm talking about these things that are very specifically focused and hyper focused on the industry side of BMX. And sometimes I get comments from people who are just guys who are out enjoying riding BMX that think that I'm talking about them. And I was like, this is applying to very specific people, not just the guy who goes to the skate park on Tuesday night to have fun.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's the thing. It's like, that is actually a hugely important aspect of it is, I think, when you're a certain age, that's kind of like the trajectory everyone has in mind, that they want to be sponsored one day, you
Yeah.
know. I do think, there's a time where like it is important to be real. Yeah, like if this stuff kind of like seems weird to you, or like rubs you the wrong way, or seems like, oh, it's tarnishing this thing that I love, then it's like it's important to listen to that voice, like I love the business side of the BMX because it like allows you, it just you can organize resources and do things that I couldn't do in my private life. I
Yeah.
can pursue projects that I couldn't pursue if I just did it personally.
Right.
But some people, like it rubs them the wrong way to think about doing these things on the business side of riding. And I think it's important to think about that. And not every rider who is sponsor level quality of rider, talented rider, not every one of them should be sponsored, and not everyone will be happy being sponsored. And I've actually known a lot of riders, some of them were actually pretty prominent riders, that once they lost sponsors, but once they were sort of past that sponsored point in their riding career, they actually really enjoyed riding a lot more once they got a full-time job and were able to ride for themselves and just
Mhm.
like ride how they did when they were kids. They're like, oh my God, this is way fun. And I don't even have to stress doing A, B, and C for the paycheck. I could just go to work and just, so like sometimes that's, you know, a better a better situation for some riders, and I think it's important to be realistic of that. And some riders find out the hard way, in the sense that they do all the work, they do everything right, they get the killer sponsor, and then it's like oil and water, and they just don't mix, and then it's like 2 or 3 bumpy years, and then they kind of get spit out in a shitty way, and that's
Yeah.
kind of a bummer. And like in hindsight, you're like, man, maybe you shouldn't have just not been sponsored and just work for the city and ride or something.
Yeah. Well, man, it's been 3 hours,
Yeah, we did it.
and we're gonna have to do another one of these like next week because I feel like we didn't talk about anything that we could have.
I'm down. I'm down, dude. I'm a talker, as you can see. I'm a talker. I love to talk. So if yeah, we'll see the comments. If people want us to talk more, we'll talk more.
Yeah, I'm totally down too. I'm at the point. I'm at the pee your pants point.
No, you're good. I think my wife, I thought it was gonna be like an hour, hour and a half. So I'm sure she's like, what happened? But
Yeah,
she gets it. It's so funny. Like, I know you're about to pee your pants, so I'm sorry. But
it's
she knows,
okay.
like, on the photography side, like, she's like, oh, how long are you gonna be? And I'm like, as long as they're riding, I'm gonna be shooting.
Yeah,
I can't like stop the session to say I agreed to come to dinner. I gotta like get the shot and then I'll be home. So it's like,
right.
I get it, dude. No,
So before we cut out and before I go pee, tell everybody where they can find the stuff that you have going on, and make sure you people let us know if we need to do this again next week.
definitely. Yes, definitely. Let us know if you want us to talk more. But right now we're doing the Borough Breaker Rally event, and that is being hosted on Billy Perry's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Billy Perry BMX, I think is just the name of the channel, Billy Perry BMX. That's going to be going on for the next few weeks throughout the rest of the month. From there, you can follow us. We have a website, low-numbers.com. We have a Patreon. You can support our future events. We also are going to we've done some Patreon packages, and we've done little things like little perks, a little zine, and some stuff we've sent out to our Patreon members. Actually, right now we have a thing too. You can join our Patreon for $5. You get a free t-shirt shipped to you. So it's a t-shirt for $5.
That's a good deal.
Yeah. So if you join our Patreon right now, we have 3 shirts up there. It's $5. There's no minimum amount of time. So you can join this month and cancel and only pay $5 and you get a free shirt. But if you stay on, then you'll get original content, you'll get more perks, and you'll help us, develop more of these events in the future.
Cool, man. So
Awesome.
I appreciate the time, and we're definitely going to do this again because I think we're both going to watch through this after the fact and be like, oh, I want to talk about this, and this, and
Totally.
we'll do it.
You go down a rabbit hole and it eats up 30 minutes and you're like, shoot, I want to talk about 5 other things, but that's just the way it goes out. That's why it's good.
That's
It's
why
all good.
podcasts are awesome, man. So
Yeah, that's right.
we'll make it happen, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Brant. I really appreciate your time.
Bye, everyone.
All right, man.